of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, June 13th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Greg Stoker, former U.S. Army Ranger, host of the Colonial Outcast podcast, will be with us to talk about Israel's many strategic and military failures. And later in the show, Hayden Clarkin, also known as the Transit Guy, will join us to talk about Kathy Hochul's insane torpedoing of New York's congestion pricing plan. Also on the show, breaking news, and it's good news finally. The Supreme Court unanimously upholds mifepristone access, a sigh of relief for abortion advocates. Meanwhile, Southern Baptist, the U.S.'s largest denomination of Protestants, votes to condemn IVF yesterday. The U.S. claims Hamas has rejected the ceasefire Israel keeps rejecting. Sources tell NBC Hamas wants a firm timeline for Israeli troop withdrawal. Israel strikes yet another designated safe zone in southern Gaza, and the WHO issues dire warnings of famine. Again. The ACLU sues Biden over his asylum ban at the U.S.-Mexico border. Biden and Zelensky sign a 10-year security deal between the U.S. and Ukraine as the U.S. widens sanctions on Russia. Hillary Clinton endorses yet another primary opponent of Jamal Bowman's. AIPAC's very own George Latimer, she did that with Elliot Engel, did not work out so well, so let's hope that holds true. The Oklahoma Supreme Court dismisses a lawsuit brought by Tulsa race massacre survivors, likely the last opportunity for them to receive reparations. House Republicans vote to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. That'll go nowhere, because he didn't turn over audio from Biden's special counsel interview, the one Biden is, pretty triggered about. I think it's not a big deal, but... A new AP poll finds over half of U.S. adults approve of Trump's felony conviction. Elon Musk is being sued for harassment by former SpaceX employees in the least surprising headline ever.
He's a recidivist on that front.
Oh, yeah. And lastly, police crack down on citizens in Argentina protesting Milei's extreme austerity and privatization bill that just passed the Senate. Very scary times in Argentina. We should be talking even more about that, honestly. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an Majority Report Thursday. I am joined now by Matt Leck and Bradley Alsop. And in the fun half, we've got Brandon Sutton. We've got Matt Binder. Hello, my friends.
Hello.
Hello. So let's get right into this breaking news here. The Supreme Court has unanimously rejected an attempt to ban mifepristone. That is great news for abortion advocates, for women's health advocates. Mifepristone, for people who are not familiar, is one of two drugs that are used in a medication abortion. It's mifepristone and mifepristol that are used together. Sorry, my allergies are out of control these days. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, mifepristone, one of two drugs used in a medication abortion. Mifepristone and mifepristol are combined, and mifepristone is the one that basically blocks a hormone called progesterone, which is necessary for the pregnancy to continue, and then misoprostol contracts the uterus, and so the person who's pregnant expels the pregnancy in the form of a miscarriage. And you can actually use misoprostol, that second drug that expels the pregnancy, on its own. It's available over the counter in Mexico, and it's 80% effective on that front. But combined with mifepristone, it's extremely safe, extremely effective, widely used, the most common method in this country to end a pregnancy, which makes sense because an overwhelming majority of abortions happen in the first trimester. Around 90% of abortions happen within the first 12 weeks. And that's when the pills are used before, surgical abortions are necessary, particularly when complications rear their heads potentially later on in a pregnancy. It's so safe, but that didn't really prevent the plaintiffs here from making the case that it wasn't. But Kaiser Family Foundation found that when those two drugs are used together, it terminates a pregnancy successfully 99.6% of the time, and there's a 0.4% risk of major complications. The mortality rate is less than 0.001%. It is an extremely safe way to terminate a pregnancy.
These lawyers wouldn't use the umbrella of safety to, try to seek some other ends of, winding down women's right to, access to different types of healthcare, would they?
You would be wrong in your naivete there, Matt. No, that is exactly the argument that they used. But the Supreme Court was not buying the fact that these doctors who brought the suit had standing here. There were 11 anti-abortion doctors. One of them is a Republican state senator from Indiana who have a history of being anti-abortion. And their claim to the court was that they were materially harmed, that's what standing means, or harmed in some way, by having to prescribe this drug to their patients. And Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote and delivered the unanimous opinion here by the court, said that standing didn't pass the smell test. This was an excerpt that our friend Mark Joseph Stern found in the opinion this morning. Kavanaugh says here, consider some examples. EPA rolls back emission standards for power plants. Does a doctor have standing to sue because she may need to spend more time treating asthma patients? A local school district starts a middle school football league. Does a pediatrician have standing to challenge its constitutionality because she might need to spend more time treating concussions? A federal agency increases a speed limit from 65 to 80 miles per hour. Does an emergency room doctor have standing to sue because he may have to treat more car accident victims? The government repeals certain restrictions on guns. Does a surgeon have standing to sue because he might have to operate on more gunshot victims? That's the point here, right? If you're basically working in a field that is affected in some way by a federal law or a statute that may alter the way you do your job or cause you to do your job in a different way, and you may not like it, but does that mean that you are the party that is harmed by said law? Or are you just in a field that has to respond to the knock-on effects of said law? So that's what the court unanimously found. I mean, from Clarence Thomas to Alito to Kavanaugh here, who wrote this majority opinion. And if you're a little bit concerned by the fact that even these psychos like Alito and Thomas signed on to this, and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, well, I do think that you are justified here, because the court was clear that this was a standing argument, as I keep repeating. The doctors had no right to bring this case. They were not harmed. It makes no sense. It opens a Pandora's box, as Kavanaugh was alluding to here. But the fight is not over, because what this signals is what Fox's Shannon Bream said, reacting to the breaking news and saying, this is probably not over.
Now, here's the twist to this. There are a number of states who tried to intervene in this case. They wanted to be parties to the case. The court did not allow that to happen. Those states have said if this case went the way that many of us thought it would, they don't get past the standing issue and don't get to the merits of the case. Those states say they are now standing by ready to file their own challenges to the way that the FDA has regulated mifepristone. So this case is over. The doctors didn't have standing. Access remains for the drug. But now watch for three of these states to say that they are going to now file their own legal challenges and try to prove they do have standing to actually get to the merits of how the case has been handled. The drug has been handled by the FDA.
Call that a boomerang case then, Shannon, because it could be coming back, all right? Stand by in case there's more coming up momentarily, Shannon.
So that is the point here, which means that the Republicans and the conservative activists on this front are not done. They have other states that are going to try to challenge this from a different perspective, maybe not from a doctor's harm perspective, but from, I don't know, maybe they'll be able to find somebody who was harmed in the process of getting an abortion, and that will be the way that they take it to the Supreme Court. As I mentioned, cases are incredibly rare. But Dave Weigel, also friend of the show, had this point this morning that I think is especially scary, where he was essentially saying this also allows for those challenges to come up in conjunction with Donald Trump getting elected, and he could appoint someone to lead the FDA as the FDA commissioner, that's a presidential appointment, who rescinds the approval of the drug. And the Supreme Court does not preclude that in the way that they ruled on this. So that is the roadmap going forward. And this is good news in the temporary, in the moment, right? But as I'm trying to reiterate, we will be back here at some point.
If I'm a political activist for the conservatives, I'm fine with having a little bit of, or not giving the anti-abortion movement a more sort of cause for excitement ahead of an election.
And that really could have been part of why Alito and Thomas, who vote for everything that conservative activists want, part of why they stood down here.
Yeah, fight another day.
We saw this in Arizona, too. I mean, they kept their secondary, more restrictive abortion law in place, but the like 2 or 3 Senate Republicans in Arizona moved to the other side and rescinded the Civil War era pre-women's suffrage abortion ban that made it extremely restrictive. So they're cognizant there of the electoral implications for them. And do we think that the Supreme Court justices are above electoral concerns?
I certainly don't. And I also don't like him actually, now that I think about it, mentioning the EPA like that. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. It's like an Escher painting, right? You look and you see new things. I'm not an art person. That's the right.
But it's also one of those
painting, right? Yeah.
But it's also one of those rhetorical devices of being like, hey, if we give you this, it could be used against us in a way that's not like,
right.
Like he's making a cogent point, but also in a way that's like self-serving to Republican interests in a Republican administration.
Yeah, and that's the fight that we will see in probably the coming months and years. Another reason why this election is so terrifying. All right, with that, folks, we are going to take a quick break. But just a reminder, this show relies on your support. We really appreciate the ability to be independent, to say what we think, to never be beholden to anybody else. And that's because of our members. The fact that, I said this on social media the other day, but Brianna Joy Gray just fired from the Hill because she was speaking critically of Israel.
Katie Halper too, from that same organization.
Exactly. And Brianna, we publicly had some disagreements, right? But this is the kind of thing where, no, when you're on the left, you were principally against this. And so I just felt terribly that she got fired for speaking critically about a genocide. And that's what happens when you have kind of companies and media that's consolidated with a lot of money and corporate power. They'll represent the interests of the powerful. And so I'm grateful that we have an infrastructure here because of the members like you to keep us independent and to keep us from feeling, the guillotine over us, so to speak. So
yeah, I mean, especially the jointhemajorityreport.com because, YouTube's nice and it's been a big growth, since I've been at Majority Report, but I also don't trust that a
It
little
could go
bit.
away,
They
right?
I mean, they change things all the time, and you can see it like, oh, in January of this year, they changed something with regards to ads, and it just like cut off, and we were doing very well before, and now it's just like, okay, and then what if they make another change, and it's like, okay, now we have an entire different economy we're dealing with, and thanks for joining the Majority Report, folks, because
Yes,
that's really it.
Join themajority.report.com.
And help us grow on Twitch too. We are close to, what is the landmark? 70,000 followers.
Oh,
so,
nice.
we're at 69, nice 508. So subscribe to us on Twitch.
All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we will be with Greg Stoker. We are back, and I'm thrilled to be joined now by Greg Stoker, former U.S. Army Ranger with a background in special operations and military intelligence. He is now an activist, political, and military analyst and host of the Colonial Outcast podcast, which I couldn't recommend more highly. Greg, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me.
So, tell us a little bit more about your background. Why or where did you serve, for how long, and I guess how did you kind of come to an anti-colonial perspective, or a perspective that was critical of U.S. empire after your time in the Army?
All right. Well, I mean, it's not a unique story. I joined the United States Army to get the heck out of wherever I was, and it was the easiest way to do it. Paid for college, stuff like that. I was never like a huge gung-ho Captain America type, but I did go into the Ranger Regiment, which is a United States Special Operations unit, and I did 4 combat deployments to Afghanistan. Started off as kind of like an assault position. I was a fire team leader, and then I transitioned more into a human intelligence collection and analysis before I got out. And I think what I started really questioning what was going on when I got exposed to targeting kinetic strikes, i.e. drone strikes under the Obama administration. And there just really wasn't a standard of proof for who we were dropping in terms of kinetic strikes. If you're on the wrong contact list, it could be greenlit. As long as you didn't destroy infrastructure, it was good. You could be a baker who, had like 4th degree connections to like the Taliban or the Haqqani or proto-Islamic State. You were still going to potentially eat a missile. So that was problematic, and it didn't work. It was strategically stupid. And then I got out, started studying post-colonial studies and international relations, and it's been a 10-year journey to get to where I am right now. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, and that is part of what you bring to your analysis, particularly of what's happening in Gaza right now, that I really appreciate, because you talked about how under the Obama administration there really wasn't the scrutiny that have been there in terms of who the targets really were and what their ties were to terrorist organizations. But I mean, the United States Army looks practically I guess, buttoned up compared to what we're seeing in Israel.
Yeah.
And what is that contrast like, even though you had those concerns as a part of the Army, and then it's on steroids with how Israel's handling Gaza?
I mean, I will never be an apologist for U.S. empire, but like, it's so bad we're looking, I wouldn't say good, but like, all right. So when it comes, apparently Israel is supposed to be fighting a counterinsurgency, right? And since we brought the U.S. Army and the U.S. military into it, U.S. counterinsurgency doctrine is kind of effective. It was more effective in Iraq than it was in Afghanistan. Afghanistan had a major foreign fighter problem. So fighters were coming in from like Pakistan and Iran and other parts. So complicating the situation. But it's called COIN, counterinsurgency doctrine. And one of the main pillars of counterinsurgency doctrine is if you're an occupying force, there's an acronym called SWEAT MSO. It's sewage, water, electricity, academics, trash, medical safety, and other. And it holds that if you're an occupation of a people and all of those sectors aren't up to code, and you cannot live in a modern standard of living, people are going to want to kill you. So if you're looking at it, so we would try to protect all these sites. Hospitals, I mean, Obama signed off on essentially bombing a hospital in 2015 in Kunduz province. But aside from that, we didn't have the state policy of bombing hospitals. And, we'd protect roads. So if we look at Gaza, they've destroyed the sewage pipes. A lot of the J dams, the 2,000 pound, bunker buster bombs have a unclassed penetration depth of 6 feet of concrete, which isn't going to collapse a tunnel, a hardened tunnel 50 feet underground, but it will collapse sewer, water pipes. Electricity, they hit power relay stations in October, so that's always been a problem. Academics, they've destroyed every college or university in Gaza. Trash, there is no trash. Everything's rubble. There's no civic infrastructure. Medical, there's like 1 to 2 trauma surgeons left in North Gaza. As a matter of state policy, they've gone and destroyed hospitals as much as they could while keeping their propaganda machine alive. Safety, there is no safety, and there's about to be a massive biological event anytime now. So they actually destroyed our own counterinsurgency doctrine that we advised them on because it is somewhat effective. But no, they're just they're not even pretending to fight a counterinsurgency. It's just straight up ethnic cleansing to make Gaza Strip unlivable. So.
Right. And so, I mean, as you describe that counterinsurgency doctrine that the United States adopted and supposed, Israel, I guess, for some time had been trying to follow to keep up appearances. But I mean, I don't know, I'm being overly generous there. Like, that is an explicit doctrine because it's in the interests of the party there, whether it be the United States Army or Israel, to basically control the way that they respond to something so that they can have some sort of victory. But when you abandon that and it's really just killing for the sake of it, that runs a fly, I would imagine, over some in, say, the United States intelligence community or in the military brass who are less ideologically genocidal and more interested in maintaining empire or power. We've noticed on this show how there's a difference in how, say, Lloyd Austin or Burns of the CIA talk, not that we hear too much from Burns, but approach Israel as it relates to how they've been handling Gaza versus how Blinken and Biden have stood so steadfastly behind Israel. Is that discrepancy kind of laid bare there?
Well, first of all, Lloyd Austin, it's kind of hard to gauge where he stands. He is a representative of the military. He will back the administration publicly, despite whatever he's saying behind the scenes. I mean, he does have a lot of problematic defense industry or military industrial complex affiliations, but it's hard to get a gauge on what military officials are believing unless you have a line on the inside. I know that there's a lot of discontent, but there's also a lot of groupthink within the military. Even if there's isolated pockets of outrage, everyone's going to toe the line. That's why we've only seen one major man from the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, resign instead of a whole onrush of people getting out, because people may disagree with it, but I remember being in that mindset. I wouldn't expect a lot of pushback or resistance. So in Burns, I mean, we know he's a diplomat. He's not really a spy master. He's trying to get this ceasefire deal done with parties that have both parties have positions that are unacceptable to the other. So.
Yeah, no, I am just fascinated, though, I guess, by the difference in terms of what is in the strategic interests of the United States versus versus Biden's kind of what he perceives as the right thing to do in terms of supporting Israel being this inherently moral thing, or what it means for his reelection bid. There's a bit of a gulf there. You mentioned the ceasefire proposal. let's talk a little bit about that. There's a lot right now in the press about back and forth about who has and who has not agreed to the ceasefire. We know that this basic framework of the ceasefire has been agreed to by Hamas for weeks, if not months. And they were in favor of the United Nations Security Council ceasefire that just passed. Israel was not. But we still then hear over and over from Blinken and other members of the White House that it's Hamas who is not agreeing to the ceasefire. Now, I think maybe that may have some more truth after the massacre for the hostage rescue, which we can get to in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But what do you make of that back and forth and how the United States is trying to present Hamas as the biggest obstacle to the ceasefire?
Well, of course they would. The one overriding goal is to provide political cover for Israel and to make them look as favorable as possible. I mean, before we get into the basics of the ceasefire, we have to acknowledge that from a strategic perspective, Hamas has achieved all of its objectives, putting the question of Palestinian self-determination and statehood back on the table, discrediting the deterrence capacity of the Israeli military and intelligence apparatus, which was destroyed on October 7th, and showing the world exactly what Israel was and getting the conversation about Palestine foremost in the global forum. So they've achieved all their strategic objectives, and Israel has achieved none of itself. None of it. First of all, it's going into pariah statehood. It's acting increasingly like a rogue state. They haven't freed all the hostages, which was one of their stated objectives. Destroying Hamas and dismantling Hamas completely was one of their stated objectives, which is impossible. They would literally have to kill everybody in Gaza, and genocidal regimes don't last, so they can't do that. And so they're in an impossible position. What they're trying to do is, you remember during the Iraq War, President Bush flew in on the fighter jet, and there was the mission accomplished on the Eisenhower aircraft carrier. That is essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to polish this massive foreign policy nightmare / turd to make it look like something that it's not, like an Israeli victory. Like, we've dismantled Hamas so much that October 7th can never happen again. Well, yeah,
and that's what the U.S. is doing too, right,
yeah.
Greg? In the sense that that's why they're trying to present it as if it's Hamas, that the Israel will end up having a victory because they get Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, even if it's not true at all.
Yeah, and so now they're trying to reframe this whole thing as Israel has degraded Hamas so much they're no longer a military threat, and now they're willing, now that they've achieved their pseudo objectives, which were never their objectives, they're now being gracious and presenting Hamas with this. But the thing is, Hamas doesn't need to accept it because they can keep fighting. According to Israeli intelligence veterans and like Mariv, Ynet News, their own intelligence officers say that they couldn't defeat Hamas before 2026. And personally, I believe that to be completely optimistic.
Right. Well, Hamas is recruiting, we know, right? And there are some insurgent Hamas fighters, I guess, in the north who have been giving Israel some grief. And so the hostage rescue operation, how did that play into the ceasefire talks? Because from Israel's perspective, that's Netanyahu and the far right getting to say, see, we need to continue this war, genocide, war, to release the rest of the hostages, when we know, though, the overwhelming number of hostages that were released were during the temporary ceasefire. They only rescued 4 in this instance and killed over 270 Palestinians. Now, there have been rumblings that the United States may have provided intelligence support for this operation.
Oh, we did.
Oh, we did. Okay. Yeah. So we provided intelligence support for an operation that saved 4 hostages and killed over 270 Palestinians as we're trying to get this ceasefire over the hump. Do you think that affected Hamas's position here? Because they probably are like, you guys are not honest brokers here. You just okayed this operation that was a slaughter.
Right. So no, it doesn't really affect Hamas's position at all, because even though Israel did this hostage rescue massacre, they got 4 hostages back. They potentially killed 3 other hostages in the hostage rescue operation, but I haven't been able to verify that. I don't think anyone has, but that's definitely a possibility. So they got the hostages back. Okay, so what's going to happen now? Hamas is going to change their tactics, techniques, and procedures around the hostages. They're going to go back into the tunnels, and no more hostages will be recovered through military action. So that's done.
Because they were in civilian homes, right, when they were rescued. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so they're not going to allow that to happen again. So basically, the only way to get the hostages back now, which is a major political pressure point, both internally and externally for the Netanyahu's administration, is going to be through diplomacy. That's the only way it's going to happen. So Hamas has shifted tactics from, doing more direct action combat operations to more booby trap IED warfare. So, which is more sustainable in a long-term a war of attrition, because they're not going to lose as many guys doing direct confrontations against tanks. So we dealt with that in Kandahar and Afghanistan, and you may get like 1-2 guys in an operation if you're lucky. But no, they're just going to have a lot less combat attrition now and be able to keep fighting for an extended period of time. Whereas the starvation and the immense suffering of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza will continue to mount and build pressure. So yes, the United States is trying to frame this as like all Hamas has to do is accept it, but they won't, because they don't have to, because they're in a strategically powerful position right now. And they may be degraded militarily, but they're still politically potent. And they won't agree to this current iteration of the ceasefire deal because it's not, the language is so vague on how Israel will be bound. And I think within the UN Security Council, there's 2 types. There's a non-binding and a binding resolution, and it's not binding on Israel. There's no coercive measures in place to force Israel to adhere to any of the action items in the ceasefire. And so why? And it's too vague. This is why Russia abstained, because they wouldn't agree to it, because they're like, they said, quote, the language is too vague. So the ceasefire is not going to happen at this iteration of the deal.
And that's also because it's so vague that it doesn't provide a timeline for Israeli troop withdrawal and making. I mean, it creates wiggle room essentially for Israel to go back into Gaza if they provide some sort of pretense for it, is my understanding.
Yes, one of the main points is they'll kind of withdraw outside of the population centers and stay on the periphery, but of course be able to respond anytime they choose to. And they'll also be able to limit freedom of movement because from different sections of Gaza.
Yeah. So in terms of Gaza, they are losing their internationally, but also we know that Hamas has been fighting back against them at least a little bit. In parts of Gaza. Now, in the north, you have Hezbollah, and Netanyahu's government has signaled multiple times a desire to expand this war into the north against Hezbollah, into Lebanon, so that if they get out of the hornet's nest that is Gaza, right, where they are forced to withdraw because of the dire humanitarian situation and international pressure, how else can Netanyahu continue to remain in power? Well, maybe he can fight Hezbollah in the north. What is the status of that?
Okay, well, first of all, this ongoing narrative about taking the fight to Hezbollah and defeating Hezbollah is completely absurd, which I'll get to in a minute. But since October 7th, one of the things since prior to October 7th, one of the things that's always kept Israel kind of safe from a military perspective is what we would call its deterrence capacity. The belief in it being the scariest military in the region, having the Mossad be this all-seeing, all-knowing, omniscient force, intelligence force. But the thing is about October 7th, it shattered Israel's deterrence capacity. We're hearing reports that Apache pilots were targeting Hamas militants in the Gaza envelope, not with military intelligence architecture, but from like WhatsApp groups with civilians. So it was incredibly embarrassing. In order to get it back, they have to defeat Hamas, which they can't do. It's just not possible. There's a whole new generation of fighters because they've created a whole new exciting acronym, WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. So I'm sure those kids are just going to let bygones be bygones. Right. But if they can't defeat Hamas, they can't defeat Hezbollah because Hezbollah is the most powerful non-state military actor in the world. They're orders of magnitude above Hamas in terms of like discipline, manpower, weapons, and equipment, because they don't have to operate in an open-air prison camp. They can. Not only that, it's that before this point, a lot of the Hamas fighters didn't have any combat experience. Well, Hezbollah's been fighting the Islamic State in Syria for a while now. So they've been doing what is now a low intensity campaign over there. And so they are also professional soldiers, right? That's all they do. The 50,000 reservists that Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant want to send to the front to confront Hezbollah, they do what, 2 years work in the tech sector, and they're getting recalled to go fight against a professional military that has honeycombed all of its military assets in a tunnel system way more complex and fortified than the Hamas tunnels in Gaza. I mean, it's just insane. And plus, they already lost to Hezbollah in 2006. They were defeated before Hezbollah was as powerful as they are now. And what the war in Gaza has showed us is that Israel, when we look at the operational autopsies conducted by war colleges in the United States, like out of Fort Leavenworth and stuff, the IDF has literally not updated their military or tactics at all. So there is no point that this campaign can succeed. All Israel will do is bomb Beirut and the Bekaa Valley, put pressure on civilians to try to pressure Hezbollah. But it didn't work in 2006. It didn't work in 2014 during Operation Protective Edge, and it's not working in Gaza because collectively punishing civilians doesn't affect military operations when it comes to asymmetrical warfare. It never has. There's no historical precedent for it. So even if you're like, why doesn't Hezbollah just care about the civilians? It's like, okay, well, that's not what we're talking about. From a strictly analytical point of view, it won't affect Hezbollah at all. But that's the core doctrine of the Israeli military. It's to punish civilians, to pressure militants.
And then, in terms of Hezbollah also getting emboldened, what are the possibilities of other states seeing funding Hezbollah and potentially their attacks on the IDF as a way to weaken the United States' standing in the region, and particularly its soft power as it relates to diplomacy in the Middle East and beyond?
Well, I mean, look, American soft power has been hit not just with this war in Gaza, but also the debacle in Ukraine. So, yeah, this does challenge American soft power. But I do want to talk about American escalation within the region, especially in Iran, despite like defense, like war hawks such as Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley, who basically just say, are wind-up toys saying, bomb Iran, hit them hard. The establishment actually doesn't want that. If we look at the drama that's played out between the United States and Iran since the beginning of this year, everything points to the U.S. State Department and Department of Defense not wanting to escalate. So a few American soldiers were killed on an air base in Jordan, and so how do we respond? By waiting 5 days, telegraphing to Iran that we were going to strike IRGC targets in the Levant. It was like, hey, Iran, we're going to bomb you. Watch out. You can't hurt Americans. And then we conducted 85 strikes, hitting mostly empty warehouses. And then after Israel destroyed the consulate in Damascus, what did the U.S. say? We will not get involved in a regional war. So we helped them defensively take down some of the Iranian ICBM or medium-range ballistic missile interceptions, but that's it. And then Lloyd Austin said yesterday, apparently according to water cooler talk, that the United States is not interested in an escalation in Lebanon because we don't have the staying power. First of all, the complications in Russia and now a potential flashpoint in Taiwan. A lot of people within the command echelon in the United States are saying, like, we don't want to go back and get involved in another forever war in the Middle East. We have other strategic interests that are going to test our staying power as it is.
And the Biden administration wants to pivot to Asia. I mean, and they have for a while. That was part of, I believe, the reasoning behind the Afghanistan withdrawal. But it makes this policy towards Israel so anachronistic, except when you take into account Biden's ideological Zionism. Now, can you mentioned there a little bit about how it became extremely obvious that the United States is uninterested in backing a wider war. What does that do to Israel's deterrence? You touched on this a little bit before, but these 9 months and also the signal that the United States won't back them if they choose to go after other actors in the region. Does that signal a shift in the collapse of kind of Israel's presentation of itself as a mighty military power in the Middle East?
I mean, again, I don't see how they reestablish their deterrence capacity, because they can't defeat either of their two main adversaries in which they're engaged in combat operations with. And while they're trying to reassert their deterrence capacity, they just did a targeted assassination. It was apparently it was a bomber strike on Sami Abdullah, which was like essentially a brigadier general in Hezbollah, which is a significant target, but it's not going to significantly degrade their operations. So if I was just reading Jerusalem Post today and Times of Israel, and they're doing a lot of COPE articles about how, like, now that they've taken out a senior Hezbollah official, Nasrallah is scared that he's next, and so they won't escalate. It's like, well, Hezbollah, even though you've killed one of their senior commanders, they are not going to escalate and open up a front. Iran doesn't want it. They don't want it. Hezbollah is a political entity that has a reputation for pretty good governance, and they know that if a front opens up, the people that they're responsible for in southern Lebanon are going to get hit hard. So that's their first responsibility, and so they're conducting escalation management on the northern border. So maintaining military pressure, taking out military sites, because they've confined their operations to military targets like sensor relays, intelligence outposts, Iron Dome batteries. They just took one out. It's $100 million of our tax dollars down the drain because we're going to have to replace it. Awesome. And then and Israel has incrementally retreated from the north, creating this no man's land buffer zone between the north and south Lebanon. And so, yeah, Hezbollah is probably just going to keep doing that. They're not going to escalate this. I think they've proven that, because this is not the first time that the IDF has taken out a Hezbollah official. So I don't think their stance is going to change at all, because what they're doing is effective. It's incredibly effective, and they don't need to have Beirut get bombed to achieve their strategic goals and their operational goals. The only one who's going to escalate this is Israel. I personally hope they don't. I keep saying I don't think they will, but they're becoming more and more a rogue actor.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they don't for everybody's sake, but we have no reason to believe that they won't. Their behavior, I think, we've played this clip by Israeli historian Ilan Pape saying that this is the beginning of the end of Zionism, but that Zionism will... the end will be extremely bloody, and the tunnel is quite long to getting to that point. Do you see that from a military standpoint, based on what you've said about their deterrence and how they've lost so much recently?
I mean, they can continue to keep bombing things and, wasting artillery shells on rubble, but there's a global supply chain shortage in RDX and HMX, and we're already using our own stockpiles for wartime deterrence and contingency operations to support Israel. So there are, it might seem, just because we're this massive empire that can build a bunch of bombs, there are still realities. It's not limitless. So they have a munition shortage, not just in offensive weapons, but in defensive missile intercepts for the Iron Dome. So I don't see how they can. This party can't last forever. Plus, we're still trying to support Ukraine, and that front demands so many munitions. Sometimes they shoot 10,000 howitzer shells a day. So what this is really doing is testing United States staying power, and we're losing a lot of soft power, because it seems like the only way that the United States does business and deals with problems is to sell more guns, weapons, and ammunition. But everybody who's in the know knows that there's just a shortage of literally RDX explosive materials. So that's another thing people aren't taking into account. So we can't keep sending weapons.
Well, that brings me really to my last question for you, Greg, which is that the diplomacy that is being done is, in my view, disastrous as it relates to the Abraham Accords, because The United States is continuing a Trump administration policy to push through normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and offering like a defense treaty with Saudi Arabia, which also could potentially mean, according to some reports, that Saudi Arabia could be allowed to develop its own nuclear weapon, but even if not, could be some arms deals for Saudi Arabia. What's your view of the Abraham Accords and why the administration is pushing so hard for this, even though clearly it seems like it's I almost wish casting more than anything?
Well, I think people in the administration are starting to notice what Saudi Arabia is doing, and they're concerned about losing our greatest strategic ally, or at least having our greatest strategic ally play both sides of the field. I mean, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, just I think a few weeks ago, publicly accepted an invitation to Tehran, after for the first time in like 20 years. Right. I think they're starting to put in plans, if they haven't already, to start like selling oil in the yuan. So, the monopolization of the Gulf states is something that we are losing. And what I say is we, I mean, the American administration foreign policy apparatus. I don't want to say we because I don't agree with it, but yeah, there's definitely a noticeable shift towards a multipolar as opposed to a Western unipolar world order right now. And yes, we could give Saudi Arabia nukes, but will that change their massive strategic interests? Like, I think more cooperation with BRICS and other players, and the de-dollarization, the push towards eventual de-dollarization is a potent deciding force within their own policy.
Well, Greg, I really appreciate your time today. Couldn't recommend Colonial Outcasts enough. We'll put a link to your podcast and your socials and stuff in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be with Hayden Clarkin talking about congestion pricing in New York. We are back, and we are joined now by Hayden Clarkin, also known as the Transit Guy on social media. He is a transit advocate who studied civil engineering at the University of Connecticut, also works in the transportation industry. Hayden, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Huge fan. So thank you.
Well, huge fan of your Twitter account as well. For anybody who wants to start to get radicalized about transit policy and how insane the United States has been in making everything catered to the car, Hayden's account is a great place to start. And never has that obsession with, I guess, maintaining our infrastructure surrounding the car been more obvious than the news from last week that continues into this week. New York Governor Kathy Hochul torpedoed congestion pricing, which was a plan in New York that had been laid out and had been taken into account for years at this point. We were making policy choices in this city based on the presumption that congestion pricing was taking effect. Just take us through the past week or so and what's happened in New York.
Sure. So I don't really even know where to start, because this has just been the worst political move, I think, in New York state history, and I think that's saying a lot. So this has been something that congestion pricing has been something that the United States has been trying to do since 2007 under the Bush administration. After like multiple failed attempts, we get to the transit crisis of the New York City subway in 2017. Everyone kind of remembers there was literally a state of emergency declared by Governor Cuomo at the time due to how bad the deferred maintenance on the subway system was. And so the plan was, we have such a huge backlog of things to do. We need to do congestion pricing. This has been too long and we need the money. And so basically in 2019, the state mandated by putting it in the budget, MTA, we're giving you authority. You need to raise $1 billion a year starting in whenever you approve of it, to make money for the capital plan and for capital improvements. And so that looks like $1 billion a year, which the bond that they would take out, which would have been $15 billion, would have been used to pay for. And so that's kind of where we're at. So in 2023, the US DOT finally gave all the final approvals. They were like, go at it, fam. You got this. We believe in you. Unfortunately, about 1 million lawsuits came, particularly from Governor Murphy, Rep. Gottheimer, who we all have our own opinions about, of you cannot do this. This will hurt New Jersey residents a lot to charge $15 to go into Manhattan, the densest and most transit-rich place on the continent. So take that for what you will. Governor Hochul really was holding out for a very long time, up until December, where she had a whole rally around it. And then 2.5 weeks ago, when she was in Sweden and said, we cannot wait to do congestion pricing in New York City. And then on June 5th, we got an about face. And now with 2 days left in the session, which on June 5th was 2 days left in the session, she decided we'll figure out another way to get the $1 billion. And everyone was like, what? Excuse me? Yeah. After spending $590 million on all of the equipment and the tolling, it's already set up, already ready for June 30th. So 25 days before, after literally years and years and years and years of planning and 28,000 environmental documents, we are where we are.
So that, I mean, first of all, I will editorialize and say we have remarked on this program that she may be one of the dumbest Democratic politicians of all time. And it's up there, because this was insane to do this within weeks of this literally taking effect. And as you say, the infrastructure being put in place and paid for, and budgets being created around the presumption that we would have this influx of money coming in from congestion pricing, $1 billion a year or more, to help pay for billions of dollars in subway, bus, other transit repairs and improvements, which is desperately needed in the city that doesn't have a lot of handicap access, has a lot of delays, many other issues with the New York City transit system. But her claim was that this would affect regular New Yorkers or regular people commuting into New York from New Jersey, from Connecticut, from Westchester County, whatever. What can you explain why that claim isn't necessarily true? Because it seems as if the income for people who drive into the city already is fairly high compared to those who take transit.
Absolutely. So I want to say I don't know if this was a decision Kathy Hochul made on her own. I do think it was congressional delegation thinking about
Hakeem Jeffries, for sure, apparently was worried about suburban voters.
Absolutely. And so when you think of, I did the math based on the report, we're talking about 50,000 commuters within the areas that are currently competitive of all of the New Jersey and New York collar congressional districts. About 50,000 people would be subject to paying that within all of those districts in total. So, I mean, if you take $1 billion a year and you divide it by 50,000 people, I think you just can pay them to stay home at that point. So yeah, the idea that a ton of working class people are just driving into lower Manhattan has just been patently false. There has been, as I said before, 28,000 pages of environmental studies and reviews to show that is in fact not the case. And of the 900,000 vehicles that come into Manhattan every single day, 170,000 people would be subject to that tax, which is about 1.5% of all commuters that go into New York City, all 5 boroughs. So it is a small, minute group of people. Now you might say, well, what about people who might have a disability or are low income? There are exemptions for people who are of low income. If you make $60,000 or less a year, you would not be subject to the fee, as well as if you had a disability or you were or you were a vehicle that transported people with disabilities to medical appointments or whatnot, you also would not be subject to this. Take the train. I don't really know what to say to people. I mean, take the train. And for Phil Murphy and Josh Gottheimer to sit there and watch New Jersey Transit literally decay and face a $1 billion shortfall as he goes around and puts a $10 billion highway widening plan through that nobody wants. I don't see how the lack of transit that you have is an excuse when you are the governor. Then fix it. Right. If you think the transit is so bad that people cannot get out of their cars, then fix it. It's an indictment on yourself.
Let's pull up this graph here just to continue to illustrate this point. New York Focus does great work, and they have these two graphs that illustrate how big how significant the problem is in Lower Manhattan in Midtown. So it's 60th and Lower, excluding the West Side Highway and the FDR, which are the two major highways that go across the coast of Lower Manhattan for people who are not in the city. So this is.
Just to be clear, those people are exempt from paying. If
exactly.
You on West Side Highway or FDR, you are exempt from paying unless you enter the zone. So
enter the middle of the island where it's
like enter a local street, correct? But
exactly.
You can literally loop around all day and you would not be charged.
And it's 60th and Lower for downtown, which includes Times Square. It includes much of Midtown Manhattan. It includes a lot of tourist destinations. Madison Square Garden, right? Ooh. So this is a graph of Manhattan traffic speeds. Mm-hmm. So you see here how they have sunk. It is sunk to a new low, and that one of the lines there is the Central Business District. And the Midtown, which is really primarily, I think, the focus of congestion pricing, you can see how that's around 5 or less than 5 miles an hour. Yeah. About 5 miles an hour. So the article says that average taxi speed last month was 6.6 miles per hour in the Central Business District, where the program would have applied. But when you look at just Midtown, which is really, again, the biggest problem here, it actually is 4.5 miles an hour, barely faster than a brisk walk, is what New York Focus talks about. So it is so congested there, and it's also contributing to air pollution, which lowers people's standards of living, that you would move around faster in Midtown Manhattan walking than you would in a car, because there are so many dang cars in that area of the city.
Absolutely. There are a few million people every day who take the New York City bus system, the MTA bus system, and they're subject to average speeds in these buses between 5 miles per hour and about 9 miles per hour, depending on the line. And you're moving how many people? And you know, when you say, well, transit's not good enough, that's why I have to drive. It's a cyclical argument, right? Buses are slow, and therefore you drive, and then you are in front of a bus, which is slow, which then makes other people not want to take the bus and therefore drive, making the bus slow again. So it's this cyclical argument, and it's just not one that really holds water. And I don't think that, arguably, I mean, I'm sure I could be corrected, but I can't imagine one of the biggest economic generators in the country having speeds of 4.5 miles per hour is good for the economy. And there is a hidden cost to congestion in general that we never talk about.
Yeah, this same article talks about how it's cost billions of dollars even if you just care about the money flowing into the economy, those delays have cost money for the city and for people affected by it. And then you also see here in the second graph that deaths from traffic-related incidents in Manhattan are continuing to hold, and it took a slight dip in 2020 because of the pandemic, but it holds at a rate that's fairly high. Last year it was 28 people killed in crashes in Manhattan, but the injury rate is even more substantial, 6,000 people injured due to traffic rates. So I saw people clowning on Kathy Hochul, who was talking about how watch out for for shark attacks in when you're going to Montauk or whatever, but not necessarily worried about the traffic deaths and injuries that result from so many cars being packed into such a tiny island and urban area.
Yeah, we're saying this the morning or the afternoon after an 88-year-old woman was killed walking across the street in Brooklyn yesterday. So this is something insanely real that we're not talking about. Pedestrian deaths have been the highest they've ever been since, I think, the 80s. This is not getting better, especially with cars being bigger. I would rather get hit by a Prius than a Dodge Ram. And as cars and SUVs get bigger, this is kind of the issue that we're dealing with. One thing I will say is that she's also been getting a lot of flack for saying that she goes to diners and she learned about congestion pricing being bad from her time in the diner. And she used a diner that is literally in Grand Central Station, which is the largest train station in the world, to say that people from New Jersey, a state known for diners with 500 diners, that New Jersey residents would not go and drive into 42nd Street and find parking, I guess, around Grand Central to go to this one diner. And therefore, that's why $15 billion of capital funding should be rejected.
Okay, so I will say this, and I grew up in New Jersey, Diner Central, love it about New Jersey. New York City used to have more diners. They don't really have them as many anymore in part because it's just too expensive to run a diner and with the real estate that's available to people in the city. So it's both antiquated and dumb and makes no sense. And just the politics of this, apparently her office was shocked by the backlash, but it was so... Brad Lander, who is the city comptroller, has announced that they're potentially going to sue Hochul's office over this because of, again, all that went into the planning that was happening in the city surrounding this funding mechanism.
Absolutely. So the MTA is actually in the law in 2019 was compelled to do the congestion pricing. So when the governor revoked that was not actually an official edict that could stop the MTA. So the MTA could still today on June 30th turn on the gantries. It was more of like, is the MTA going to go to war with Kathy Hochul? And I think they've chosen not to do that, it sounds like. But yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense given that they have the authority currently on the books to do so. And one thing also that we haven't talked about, and I know you brought up accessibility, there are 472 stations in the New York City subway system. It is a massive system. I think it's number 3 in the world for number of stations. 69% do not have elevators. So the money that would have gone to this capital plan would have actually added 70 elevators as part of this massive plethora of capital spending. It would have gone to 70 elevators that are located in all 5 boroughs. And that's not happening anymore. Or at least it's been deprioritized, as MTA has kind of said in the last couple of days. But the really big problem here is that the MTA was sued for not having ADA accessible stations after the ADA Act passed under the first Bush administration. And so they are being compelled to, by 2055, all stations have to be accessible. And now if we're talking about that, we're talking about if you literally were born the day that it was signed into law, you would be 65 by the time the MTA subway system was fully accessible. And this throws a massive wrench into that because now we are pausing all of this elevator work until we can figure out what is going on.
I mean, that lawsuit sounds like it has a lot of merit. You're not allowed to. That was one of the more successful, honestly, regulatory moves that the federal government has ever made, which is to make every place accessible. And it's just not the case in New York City whatsoever. And as you say, a majority of the stations. 69% don't have elevators. That's a violation of the federal statute.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what we're now adding into the mix. And also Second Avenue subway, which is supposed to move 150,000 people a day once open, is completely told to stop work. Because one of the things that we didn't realize, or people don't realize, is that when the federal government comes in and says, hey, for Second Avenue subway, we're going to give you $3 point something billion, that's a match to the state's funding. And so when the state does not have that funding anymore, the federal monies that were earmarked to it are now in flux and are not kept. And so now we have to figure out of like, are we have to going through this whole funding process again to fund something that we've already started working on? This is the Kathy Hochul transportation plan right now that we're seeing. And one thing she said was in her speech, which was a crazy about face, was this will hurt small businesses. And her proposal was to add a payroll tax in lieu of a usage tax for cars.
That was going to be my next question. Can you explain that? Because
I can't.
So a payroll tax is a tax on people making wages, and or you know not everybody, right? But I don't know how they would structure it, but like it's lower to middle to maybe even middle upper income people, where it's a tax on their paycheck to pay for this. But correct. It also, if you were to just say, okay, that's the funding mechanism now, we'll tax New Yorkers more. That money was also supposed to go out to train lines in the suburbs to help improve them as well. Correct. So that's money getting taken out of the pockets of regular New Yorkers to help the suburbs double.
10% of the congestion pricing in the law is that it has to help Metro North, which serves Connecticut and upstate New York, as well as Long Island Railroad, which serves Long Island. And so with her idea, New Yorkers would get taxed to then pay for the suburban transit systems and train systems of people who would not, or of drivers who would come in, still not have to pay anything. And we would have to pay their improvements for them.
Right. And while also not disincentivizing them from coming into the city via car, which is also harmful for our environment, which should not get lost in this discussion, this is also has been endorsed by environmentalists, as you say. And it's, as we kind of wrap up here, Hayden, transit, or I should not transit, congestion pricing has happened in other cities in the world. This would have been the first of its kind in the United States. But this is not like New York is making this out of whole cloth. I know London has congestion pricing, and it's taken effect, and it's had some good results. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You were bringing up pedestrian and traffic deaths. Traffic deaths since 2019 in London have gone down 40% since it was implemented. Traffic's gone down. And one thing in the last London elections, I think it happened, I want to say maybe 2 months ago, there were London elections for the mayoral race. And Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of London, who is a major champion for congestion pricing, this was a referendum on, do we still want to have congestion pricing, because this man wants to expand it. And the places in which he wanted to expand it were the biggest swings towards him in this race. People see how good it is. And I understand it's not popular to think like, oh, I'm going to get taxed to like live my day-to-day life. But once it's actually implemented, these plans have been super popular. And it's just one of those things where it's really sad, because San Francisco's been thinking about it, and other cities have been thinking about it as a way to make their transit better. And if New York City's not going to do it, it really spells doom for the rest of all of the cities who might potentially want to do it. If it's not good for New York City, then it's not good for anywhere. And so that's kind of what Kathy Hochul is doing. And also one last thing is the political idea, or like the political thought to then 3 days after canceling congestion pricing, go to a car dealer fundraiser for yourself. That was
a little on the nose.
Dealer association at $5,000 to $10,000 a head. The math ain't mathing. Like, just you need to fire your team and like rehire better advisors, because that is a crazy optics.
Yeah, it's a little much, Kathy. Just tone it down slightly. Well, Hayden, really appreciate your time today, and thanks for that wonderful explainer about this. Hayden Clarkin, the transit guy. You can follow him on Twitter. Where else can people find your work, Hayden?
I'm on Threads and Instagram, the transit guy, and then on Twitter, the _transit_ guy. Elon will not give me that. Will not let me remove those underscores.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate you. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, Hayden, and talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Okay, with that, we're going to wrap up the first part of this program, the free part of this program. Head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. We will take your calls, read your IMs. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we had Ben Fong on talk about the Oddfellows. We also talked about AOC a little bit and some outreach to Zionists about hate, which is not what I would do. And we talked a little bit about what happened in labor after Jeremy Corbyn took over. So check that out if you want. David and I discussing that. People gave it high marks. And so, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also talk about what Jimmy Dore fans are doing these days.
Oh my God.
Which is stalking Jill Stein and for not going on the Jimmy Dore show.
Ever increasingly niche. That they just keep narrowing that audience. On ESPN, we talked a little bit about both the championship series, and our analysis for the Celtics and Mavs still holds now that the Celtics are up 3-0. We talked about the Panthers against the Oilers, also still holds because the Panthers are up 2-0. And then we did a pretty deep dive into the WNBA and media figures' reaction to Caitlin Clark being left off the Olympic team, and why it's ridiculous. YouTube.com/ESPN show. And we have Brandon Sutton, like magic.
Hello.
Like
magic.
How are you, Brandon, and what's happening on the discourse?
I'm doing well, Emma. On the discourse this week, we'll be talking about Hunter Biden's conviction, Trump's hunt for his VP, and the upcoming presidential debates.
There's some double. Is your audio doubled?
Oh, I don't know. Try it, Brandon.
Hello?
Okay. I don't know what I'm hearing. That might be me. Well, it sounds good to everybody else, but check out the discourse, and we're waiting on Matt Binder. We'll see him soon, but check out Left Reckoning check out Left Reckoning 2, Scam Economy, and Leftist Mafia, and Doomed. All right, guys, we will head into the fun half. 646-257-3920. See you there.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like,
I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing.
That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
No.
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best.
Violet tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back. We do have Matt Binder, but he will be with us in just a second. Turning off the voicemail. 646-257-3920. DSA Aaron from Atlanta. The Michael Brooks at the end is amazing. Yes, that was a great touch. Daniel Panic says...
Is that all from one appearance of yours?
I don't know. I mean, the song is such a banger. It's very Tim Pool centric. So I guess that was a seismic moment in
Well, that's the thing is
people's understanding of me.
There's also the video. The previous Fun Half song was Sam's Crowder moment. It kind of seems like that's what happens. Is like we have a sort of, and then as a capstone, do a song about it.
I guess I just got to do more debates. Between the 1 and the 5 says the theme song has clearly used some kind of effects on Tim Pool's voice. Oh, there he is, Matt Binder. Hello, Matt. And you're muted. God damn
muted
it.
Binder.
Oh, that's my fault because I muted myself when I went to get my soda. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What soda did you get?
Oh, just Coke.
Yeah. Oh.
Coca-Cola in a
glass?
in a Chuck E. Cheese cup.
Nice.
That's how you know you have kids.
Yes, or I just go to Chuck E. Cheese myself. But I have kids, right?
Don't tell people that. Don't tell people that.
It's an arcade. No, I take my kids. I don't go to Chuck E. Cheese by myself.
But
Beth protests too much.
Yeah, right. What's happening on Doomed and Scam Economy?
We had a good stream this past just last night. God, time is just I don't even know anymore.
I know.
It was a long stream. I went over 4 hours somehow, talking about various topics. I had someone from the organization Progressive Victory on as well because I'll be headed to the. They're having an event next weekend to help knock on doors and canvass for Jamal Bowman, and I'll be taking part in that. I wanted to, talk with them about some issues that my audience might have heard about their organization and to lay it out open for everybody. So I had them on and looking forward to knocking on doors for Jamal Bowman. People should come out.
That's a good way to transition, I guess. Matt, you put this clip in the samples, right? The long radio interview. Well, it was you, Bradley? Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Scratch that. This is a little long, but I'm taking Bradley's word for it that it's worth it. It's a call into Brian Lehrer's WNYC radio show. And George Latimer called, I guess a caller is...
Yeah, George Latimer is on with Brian Lehrer, and usually on Lehrer's show he has constituents call in. So
I don't know anything about this guy. Is he a right winger?
No, Brian Lehrer is just like a long-time WNYC radio host, public radio host.
Gotcha.
So people will call in. This woman who calls in, she says that she's a constituent in the district in New York 16th, and she's a black woman.
Okay.
She contextualizes that before she gets into why she's skeptical about supporting
George Latimer. And I'm curious to see how he responds here. Here we go.
Okay. But I find it interesting that you talk about things like, pro-choice when you take money from AIPAC that comes for women and women's rights, but that's a side comment. My core comment is, as a black person in the district, I find it impossible for you to be able to adequately represent my interests and the interests of other people of color for a multitude of reasons. And let me go into one of them that I find really problematic. You know, when Andrew Cuomo was facing his reckoning for sexually harassing women, and you came to his defense, you had the audacity to compare what Cuomo was experiencing to the lynching of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old child who was mutilated, murdered, and lynched. And I find it completely offensive that you would make that comparison on top of a bunch of other things that you do. I'd like for you to respond to that. And with that response, what I don't want you to do is to engage in tokenization, because every time you're asked about race, you then start going into a litany of a, quote, I have black friends response. You know who also has black friends? Donald Trump. And proximity to blackness is not a shield from racism. And so I think you're a racist, and I think that the way that you engage with people of color in your district that ask you hard questions, you respond by being very aggressive with them, very combative with them, and you marginalize them as you go into your response. So I want you to respond to how you could adequately represent somebody like me when I think the way that you come for me and people like me actually attacks and endangers people of color in your district and this country.
Thank you for your question, County Executive.
Wait,
Latimer.
can we pause it?
Tough
Can we
question.
pause it? Can we pause it for a second? I just gotta.
Well done.
I mean, wow, that was
Making New Yorkers
tour de
proud.
force.
Yeah,
Oh
she
my
was prepared.
God.
She should have started with the first, long time, first time.
Yeah. She should have started that with it like that. It's someone's computer is playing, and that's why I hear Brandon twice. I think. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm obsessive about this audio. But yeah, no, it's that was really amazing. Can we pull up his actual quote here that I sent in the chat about Emmett Till, just so people know exactly what Latimer said at the time? This is from an old Facebook post from March 18th, 2021. Latimer said at the time, here we go. In a time of irrational anger and emotion, let me try to take a serious take on a serious issue, the charges against Andrew Cuomo. These are serious charges that assert unacceptable behavior. No man can truly appreciate what a woman goes through in moments like this. But two, in our world, no matter how heinous the crime committed, we presume innocence until guilt is proven. That standard, when we adhere to it, protects you and me. And when it is not adhered to, when a mob acts in its own sense of justice, it turns out to be a crime itself. That's one part. And then he says here at the bottom. That was the retraction? Okay. This is what...
Here's the original version. In our world, no matter how heinous the crime committed, we presume innocence until guilt is proven. That standard, when we adhere to it, protects you and me. And when it is not adhered to, when a mom hangs Emmett Till, the justice turns out to be a crime itself.
All right. Well, that's pretty amazing. Ooh. So that's what she's referencing here. And let's hear how Bowman's challenger, Latimer, responds.
Well, clearly, I can't satisfy the caller because she's made up her mind. What I can tell you is that the Mount Vernon Democratic Committee, which is 85% African American, endorsed me unanimously for this position.
He just did it. He just did the thing you told him not to do.
Of African American county legislators, African American elected officials throughout the county. I have the support of unions like CSEA and TWU Local 100, which are multicultural, both African American and Latino individuals. They're not offended by my policies. I think the caller has a point of view which is shared by some people, but I do not believe it's shared universally. I have the support from some members of the black clergy who understand who I am as a person. They don't judge me by a tweet, and they don't judge me with a predetermined notion that somehow because I am white, I can't possibly represent somebody who is not white. You can only be in one demographic, and if the philosophy of where we are heading is that you cannot be in office unless you have my identity, then we're in a bad place.
In fairness, the caller did not say that, right? In fairness, the caller did not say that, right?
No, but what I'm saying is I'm responding to a question in my terms, She was, I think, pretty clear that she's not happy with me and that I can't represent her interests. That's what she said. And so what I'm saying is, if we are at the point where because I am not of the same demographic as she is, I can't represent her interests, then I don't know where you go with
Just
that.
pause it
I
real
think
quick.
realistically,
She said your rhetoric about specific things, and including like also your supporters, like it's not because you're a white guy.
Yeah, I good job to Brian Lehrer there. I wasn't familiar with him before, but he did a great job.
I will say that he forgot to mention the support that he gets from one of the most important pillars of the black community, Hillary Clinton.
Yes,
That's true,
right.
yeah.
She did endorse Latimer, and she had previously endorsed the incumbent when Bowman was challenging him in 2020, Elliot Engel. We saw how well that worked out for Elliot Engel, so I'm hoping the same thing happens here.
as she is, I can't represent her interests, then I don't know where you go with that. I think realistically,
Not what she said.
we are only the demographic we are. And then in theory, you only vote for the person who looks exactly like you. That might get you Clarence Thomas. I don't know. But whatever
Anti-white
it is,
racism.
Brian,
That's what this is.
whatever it is, I'm responding to her question on my terms. Once again, I'm trying to articulate what I think. And I understand she wants me to comment within her framework, which clearly is a framework that doesn't support me.
The Cuomo Emmett Till thing that she refers to, I think I have the text in front of me. You wrote, I think, on Facebook, in our world, no matter how heinous the
I
crime.
deleted it, Brian. I put it on Facebook. I was angry at the time. I deleted it within half an hour. I thought better of it. It was a foolish tweet. I have said so, and I deleted it at the time. It is not reflective of the broader way that I deal with circumstances like this, but I recognize it was a foolish set of words. It was hurtful to some people, and I deleted it. Now, having deleted it within a half an hour of my posting it, people want to define my whole career based on that. And when I say that I grew up where I did, that is the environment I grew up in. I am not trying to establish anything other than a framework for my life. And when my opponent talks about he grew up in public housing, I grew up in the situation as well, and that's all I'm trying to reference.
So you deleted it a half hour later. She raised that people deserve to know what it was. The quote was, in our world, no matter how heinous the crime committed, we presume innocence until guilt is proven. That standard, when we adhere to it, protects you and me. And when it is not adhered to, when a mob hangs Emmett Till, the quote, justice turns out to be a crime itself. That was in the context of defending Andrew Cuomo. So I guess people would question,
Brian,
that was your impulse.
Good
Brian,
job.
Would you also qualify that tweet occurred long before the final report came out on Andrew Cuomo's guilt or
Doesn't
innocence?
matter.
At the time, people were calling on him to resign on the basis of the accusations. And what I said at the time was, you need to have the full report come out. I trusted Tish James to do a thorough job. She did. She came out with a report. When the report came out, I did call
Okay, it's not Emmett Till.
Was at that point in time what I considered to be a rush to judgment that was unfair, because you cannot
All right,
take
can you
an
pause it for a sec? The rush to judgment in Emmett Till's instance was what resulted in a lynching and extrajudicial killing of a little boy based on the claims of a white woman who said that Emmett Till basically harassed her, went after her, attacked her. Though the context of that was that it was in an incredibly racist time, and the result was a racist killing of a little boy.
Yeah, in a lynching culture.
Versus a powerful man who, in the context of like a reckoning on sexual abuse within the workplace and using power dynamics to get for powerful men to get ahead and do what they want sexually, these women came out and made those accusations. Would you say the context is a little bit different?
It's a little different, although
it's not only obviously the main thing here is comparing Andrew Cuomo to Emmett Till, but it's also extraordinarily demeaning to the women that came out who were abused by Andrew Cuomo, literally calling them equating them to this woman who lied basically in order to see that community carry out this racist lynching of this young black kid.
Right, Binder. It's literally to your point. It's not only comparing Cuomo to Emmett Till. It's comparing Cuomo's accusers to that of a lynch mob.
Yes,
right. That of the people looking to, as you said, Emma, extrajudicially attack and brutally murder someone because of a false allegation in a racially animated hate crime. And it's also just rich that this racist prick literally gets asked by a black woman to respond to that, and please do not tokenize my entire racial group, and also not grind your teeth into dust in anger because you're getting questioned by a black woman. And he just responds by talking about all of his black friends and black interest group support while grinding his teeth into dust in anger because a black woman questioned him.
Yeah, it's amazing.
He also kind of blames anti-white racism on it. Like he blames it on anti-white racism. He's just like, she won't vote for me because she won't vote for me because I'm white, which also, I don't want to do identity politics, but it is weird to me as a black person that his impulse when he's heated, the first impulse of this white politician when he's heated is to compare things to Emmett Till.
Yeah.
As a black person from the South, I don't do that. So it just makes it seem as though, I don't know, he was reaching for a way to self-victimize.
Right.
Well, it's not self-victimize, make a victim out of Andrew Cuomo.
It's also, so, I mean, this was from the, when last week, Jamal Bowman's challenger, there we go, Latimer, was endorsed by Mondaire Jones, who once fashioned himself as a progressive, but has now kind of folded himself into the Democratic establishment and a pro-Israel stance in his race. So when Mondaire Jones endorsed Latimer over, when Mondaire Jones endorsed, yes, I said that right. Mondaire Jones endorsed Latimer over Jamal Bowman. The quote was that he was not a racist. Oh, shoot, I just lost it there. Because he had support from someone in the black community.
From a Zionist plant.
Right. So that is really how he sees everybody. It's just like, oh, good. If you're not supporting me, caller, you've made a predetermination based on my race. But for black people who are voting for me, well, that's proof that I don't have a problem appealing to other people because of their race.
And then
I also want to really quickly. I want to also mention, like, he chalked it up in his defense of that post, comparing Andrew Cuomo to Emmett Till. He chalked it up to, it was a moment of, I was upset, it was heated. But if you look at the post, it's literally him saying, he starts it out with, in a time of irrational anger and emotion, let me try to take a serious take on a serious issue. He's literally saying everyone else is in a moment of heated rhetoric and not thinking clearly. Yet I, the very serious individual, I have thought this through. I have laid it out here for you. Like his excuse for what he wrote is bullshit. He sat down very clearly and took the time to write this. He was clear-headed, clear-minded. This is just who he is.
Yeah. We have this quote here I was referring to. The argument about me running a racist campaign falls flat on its face when people who are African American, Latino, and Asian are supporting me, he said in an interview. That is not how that works.
The argument about me running a racist campaign falls flat on its face when people who are African American, Latino, and Asian are supporting me.
It also goes counter to what he said to that caller when he said, like, this was also very racist, but it also goes counter to that point of view. He said, if you're only going to vote for someone who looks like you, then I guess you're going to go get yourself a Clarence Thomas. Right. He said that in the call. Well, guess what? Clarence Thomas, like, he's only viewing Clarence Thomas in that light, but he's not viewing it in the other situation where, there are black conservatives who support white supremacist Republicans and conservatives. Like, yeah, you do have supporters who are black. That does not mean that they automatically are representative of the entire black Democratic electorate.
So, yeah, he should be asked, is Donald Trump a racist because he appointed Ben Carson to be this head of housing and urban development? He has a black friend.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, I just think that the Democrats feel as though they own political blackness. And I don't mean that in the way like Candace Owens is always like, Democrats have black people on the plantation. I just mean it in terms of like what they feel as though they are the party that is capable of weaponizing and mobilizing the idea of blackness and black people and black people's issues at the political level. And the fact that they have black people in their party gives them some legitimacy, along with the fact that Black people vote for them. But we see how they use it. We see that it's always used to be pushing for neoliberal aims.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's classic sort of Zionist, like, oh, you're just doing this because you're anti-Semitic. Well, you're just doing this because you're anti-white.
Exactly.
And it also combines with what he said recently in that Zoom debate with Jamal Bowman, where he called out Jamal Bowman for saying he wasn't representative of the district, and he's more representative of Dearborn, Michigan,
and San
Francisco, California. I mean, you can't get a more clear dog whistle of, this guy's got those those Muslims and gays from outside of Westchester and that area of NY 16. I mean, what in what world is this guy even at this point in time in the era we are living in? How is this guy even like a milquetoast Democrat? This guy is a conservative. This guy is so behind, even for this district. I mean, the idea that like this district is super conservative. This district contains a chunk of the Northern Bronx. I mean, this district is like, I think it is majority white, but it's also like something like 20% Latino and like 30% Black, or maybe those numbers are flipped, but it's not like upstate white district. So this guy does not represent this district. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think it's also just clear from the past few months that the Democratic Party is using the genocide of Palestinians by Israel as a mechanism, and also like the sort of confusion around the morality of that at home amongst their base as a push to purge some of the more progressive elements of the Democratic Party out of the party. Yep. They know that if they continue to allow them to be in the party, they might not be able to use this issue to drive a wedge in their base and their voters, because the tide is turning on that. So I think we're seeing a push against a lot of the more progressive politicians or Democratic Party by AIPAC, by the Democrats, by Hillary Clinton, to just remove them from the party. Now they're no longer useful.
Knowing that it's Republican money that's disproportionately going into AIPAC, and that's how they're doing it. It's Republican money flowing in. And I know that there are certain kinds of Democrats who are more than happy with it, but that's an understanding. It's like, no, we are actively happier to have Republican influence in this district than a progressive influence. And that kind of says everything about the Democrats' relationship with its base.
I mean, the thing about the Emmett Till thing, that's not the only thing. If he had a history of stand up for racial justice and progressive politics, everyone would just think of that thing he tweeted about Emmett Till and deleted was a weird moment. But instead, he's a giant recipient of AIPAC money and talking about how he doesn't want to tax rich people. And that is a racist organization, AIPAC is. And people should be aware, because I think this is really, really important that we confront what this is, which is an assault on our political system by Zionists. It happened in the UK after Jeremy Corbyn won, and there's this multi-part series by Al Jazeera that everyone should watch, who cares at all about any of these politicians, the Labor Files. And it goes into a conspiracy by supporters of Israel to attack people as anti-Semitic, despite the fact that there was actually quantitatively more investigations into anti-Semitism after Corbyn got in than after. You wouldn't know that based on the narrative spread about that. They will try that here because that's the main play that they have, and that's the play that like the ADL has been, when ADL was smearing Edward Said in the 80s as if he had a bomb vest under his suit when he would appear on television appearances. Like, this is the playbook.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. All right, folks. Let's take a quick call here.
Which is why AOC should not be reaching out to Zionists to talk about hate, but we don't need to get into that.
That's a whole nother thing. That was
disaster.
I think she wants to run for Senate. I think that's what that is.
She's gonna help purge the I don't like to be too alarmist, and I think like obviously relative to most Congress people, AOC is like top 5. But that is very dangerous. And if the staffers for the squad don't watch like the Labor Files or aren't familiar with what happened there, it's going to happen here. And the first way you do it is have people presented as experts on anti-Semitism that are telling you that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism have a weird overlap that we can't be really certain about defining, but you might cost people jobs. jobs, and it is absolutely can't be tolerated at all. But it's being written into legislation, and so like it's an emergency.
Voight Lives Matter said, is this emblematic of a right shift in overall national politics? It seems like Dems are over progressive measures and just would rather lean right. Well, I think they do this a lot during an election year, but I think that the Biden administration, despite early on and some of the antitrust stuff trying to incorporate some of the Bernie-esque platform planks and whatever cachet Elizabeth Warren thought she got by cozying up to Biden fairly early on, it's worn out. It's worn out. And they're operating once again like they did in the 90s and the 2000s. It's just a question of when will liberals realize that them pivoting to the right is going to only accelerate us into a fascist decline. Christopher H.I. says, Mondare endorsed Latimer. I can't believe I campaigned for that guy. Glad I don't live in that district anymore. Yep, it's insane.
People like Mondare and Fetterman are why it's so hard to actually get people to support, good, like say Ilhan Omar, AOC, despite my, pretty severe reservations about her lately. But yeah, it's demobilizing, and it's exactly what I remember this documentary on. The Peter Pomerantsev on Russia, and it went into, and Adam Curtis also did a little bit on inspired by that, but about how they would put money into all sorts of things so you wouldn't really know. Like that's what's going on here too. It's not just in Russia where money plays every side so it can win whatever the outcome.
Hogtown says, don't know if you guys saw that Hillary Clinton endorsed Latimer, thereby cementing her death spiral into irrelevancy. One can only hope. Pinterest MILF says, say what you want about Latimer, but that MFer doesn't need to look both ways before crossing the street.
Okay.
Ramona Frankenstein said, so basically what Latimer is saying is don't believe women. That's a message that should resonate with a liberal audience. Totally.
I don't know if,
it needs to be more widely disseminated, because in the NBA championship last night, what do I see?
The party project,
more ads against Jamal Bowman.
The party apparatus is really strong, and I don't know if you can really count on liberals' principles over propaganda.
Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Latimer's original draft in response to that question was much funnier. I am Andrew Cuomo, and like Andrew Cuomo, I am gay, I am Muslim, I am black, I am Emmett Till. Fart Twain says, how sad was Latimer when he had to throw out his Cuomo sexual sweatshirt? Definitely was sad about that. Notorious EIG says, did you guys see the video of the guy whose house was rammed into by a Tesla and towed within 3 minutes of it happening? The guy who posted it also claimed he was threatened and shoved by the tow truck driver. What?
Yeah, I saw that video. It's unclear. No. It's unclear what exactly is going on. He in one video, well, basically it is clear. Tesla crashed into his home, and then he showed photos that claimed with like timestamps that showed just how quickly a tow truck came, and how the tow truck came onto his property and towed the Tesla away before police got there. And he tried to like get the guy to stop so the police could see what happened. And the tow truck driver basically cursed him out and threatened him. He sort of went into this theory that maybe Tesla has some deal with these tow truck companies. But then in another video, he came out and said he received a lot of response from that video with people who have experience with like the tow truck industry. And it turns out they actually listen to like, the police radios, and they try to get to these sort of things before others do in order to take these these totaled cars to like chop shops and stuff to make money off the parts or whatever. So it's unclear exactly what this looked into. I would love to know why this Tesla, to me the real interesting is, why did this Tesla crash into this guy's building with this Tesla on the self-driving mode? That's what I want to know. But the tow truck thing, that's unclear, and it seems to just be like an issue of the tow truck industry being seedy, which I don't think anyone could argue with that one.
Yeah.
If you can't trust,
tow truck
emergency
drivers.
tow truck drivers. I've heard there's a lot of like parking lots with unsold Teslas being stored.
Yes, I've seen those. Yeah, there's apparently you can find them. You can find them on Google Maps. There are huge lots.
Are there squatters' rights for those?
Teslas.
No one wants them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steely Dan Arquez, Don Draper took the train to the city from Ossining, and he was doing pretty well for himself. Yes. I mean, I grew up in a wealthy suburban area of New Jersey, and everyone takes the freaking train. Everyone takes the train. I mean, not everybody. I guess not that wealthy people, but upper middle class. Like, this affects...
I support authoritarian
Yes.
measures to make people rely on public transit versus automobiles, which also require authoritarianism measures, which happen to kill cities, including
Car
probably
culture
yours.
is strong. Car culture is strong here in America. Not in New York City, but we have a lot of transplants. We have a lot of surrounding suburbs. So many people just believe all of the car propaganda. You got to have autonomy. You want to be waiting for a train. The train is dirty. The train is dangerous, and
Yeah.
they internalize that. And then some people just, not you, Emma, but some people just grow up in the suburbs and they view being an adult, with having certain things, having certain material signifiers of being an adult, like having a house with a backyard, and having a wife and like a certain number of kids, and then having a car and having kind of mobility, and
Having a pregnant
doesn't
wife
have,
that you can make not drive the car like Stephen Crowder.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Control.
yeah.
The car is a method to control your wife. I mean, doesn't everybody want that?
Yeah, I mean, public transportation means your wife can get away from you.
That's
Zach,
so
can
true.
you imagine your pregnant wife on public transportation? All
You
hell
failed as a
breaks
man. Yeah.
Right. Cuck City. Lefter Baref says there are two stoplight. Your wife's riding something else. Sorry. Lefter Baref said there's two stoplights on my commute that are in completely useless places. One intersection is a cul-de-sac and a church parking lot, and the other is a three-way intersection that stops traffic on the main road for a subdivision. They're timed in the most infuriating way, and there's never any crossway traffic. They've made me so angry, curious, and I'm excited to follow Hayden and learn more about transit. You should. Juniper J. So your governor did something on behalf of people who can't vote for her, New Jersey, etc., won't vote for her and won't donate to her campaign. Am I getting this right? Yes, you are.
It's not just the left that's pissed about it. I think you kind of mentioned it, but it's a wide swath of
Democrats.
people that we are never on the same side of issues on.
Yes. Big Green Joe says, your guess is right about the IDF's invasion of Lebanon in 2006. I clearly remember talking heads and TV generals losing their minds over Hezbollah's ability to fight back. Unlike the unarmed Palestinian civilians, Israel has been accustomed to attacking in the West Bank and Gaza. Ginger A.
Yeah, I don't know. If you read anything about the Hezbollah, I don't know why Israel's so eager to open up another front with them.
Because Netanyahu wants to stay in power, so wartime government, baby.
And I think they can drag the United States of America's army into it too if they start losing to Hezbollah.
Yep.
That's what I worried about. Like, what if we woke up and Israel had nuked Tehran? What do you think America's response would be?
Yeah. Well, I worry about say the Iran decides to exploit some of the fissures in the Iron Dome, which they probably have the technology to do so. Or Hezbollah does, like what if someone dies within Israel, God forbid, miles away they're massacring people, but I know people need to get their pedicures done in Tel Aviv. Like that
won't happen until Israel does something that.
But they could.
I know exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
it's gonna be them that acts to make things worse.
Ginger A. Squatches, tell the guests from one combat veteran to another, I love him and I'm proud of him. Not easy to go against the culture of the military. Well, hopefully he sees this. Alex from Washington said, good shit, Greg Stoker for best ofs. Knocked it out of the park as usual, Emma. Yes, I was really happy to finally get him on. I just saw the time. Dang it. Let me take a quick break here. Calling from a 707 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 707.
Hey, this is Robert in Manhattan.
Robert in Manhattan, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I called in last year around the same time just to thank you guys for your coverage of trans issues, especially yours. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate that first. And also thank you for going on Tim Pool's show, because I love to watch you guys rewatching those clips and laughing at how pathetic he is.
Yeah.
And, ever since October, I've found myself a bit more of a rewatcher than watching new things, just because, of all the coverage.
It's
so
comforting to watch things you have seen before. I think there's been some analysis that like people with higher anxiety, I'd include myself in that, love rewatching shows because you know how it's going to go.
Exactly. And those ones always have a satisfying ending for me. But I actually wanted to talk about a little bit about race and white supremacy in America.
Sure.
So I just wanted to make a couple of recommendations for some people, and then a final comment about propaganda. I just finished my second year of law school, and it was very enlightening for me, especially since if anyone knows anything about law school, generally your first year is pretty much planned out for you, and then you finally get to choose your own schedule in your second year. So I took a critical race theory seminar. I took a class on basically police abuses, and that, along with the internship that I did last year, which was at a resource center for capital appeals attorneys in California, I learned, I would say, a lot more about the way that our penal system is racist. And, you know, as a person who considers themselves to be highly progressive before coming to law school, and also knowing, like, the rhetorical traps around, like, FBI crime statistics and that kind of thing, I knew that, but I didn't know the extent that it actually went to. And I think that even a lot of people that consider themselves to be well-informed, maybe they also might not know quite the extent that it goes to. So I would just suggest, if anybody is interested, to read the article Whom the State Kills by Scott Phillips and Justin Marceau. And I would also suggest that they pick up the book Critical Race Theory, The Key Writings That Form the Movement. That was edited by Kimberly Crenshaw and a couple other professors. And I would just think that, you know, even people that consider themselves to be highly progressive and educated, they might still have taken on some of the propaganda that has been going around about CRT. And if you just read some of the key writings, I think that you'll kind of see that it's really not trying to tell you what life is or what even race is, but to give you the perspectives of a wider range of people than is normally seen in academics. And being able to take on those perspectives, even if sometimes you read it and maybe you shake your head and you think, oh, I don't really vibe with this, I can't really understand where you're coming from, I think you'll also be able to see a lot of really good insight into the way that race was shaped in America. And sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, and then just lastly, I want to talk a little bit about propaganda, because people like Tim Pool, people like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, they like to say, like, you know, when these horrific mass shootings happen, even when the people have demonstrably watched their shows, saved them, and so on, they like to say, you know, we're not causing this stuff to happen. And more than that, you know, the Daily Wire has their, you know, movie and their kids programming, and that stuff, you know, people can say, like, that doesn't really affect the real world and so on. And I think, you know, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but, you know, if you ever want something to launch back to people who say, you know, these fictional things, they don't create real world terror, I would encourage people to look into the film The Birth of a Nation, and anyone who's into cinema or who is, you know, a studier of race in America is probably familiar with it, but it's an adaptation of a novel, Klansman, and it was the first movie shown in the White House, and it was screened by Woodrow Wilson. Yep. And I'm sure everybody knows that the KKK, one of their signature things is to burn crosses, but most people probably don't know that that actually came from this film, The Birth of a Nation. That's where cross burning originated from, and it was taken into the real world in the second revival of the KKK and used to terrorize people in real life. So that's something that I think more people should know about, and is a reason why you can't take anybody seriously from the Daily Wire or Tim Pool when they say, you know, our rhetoric doesn't create real life violence.
That's a good point. Appreciate the call, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you. A good one.
You too. Calling from an 831 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
I believe that's me, Daniel in Los Angeles.
Daniel in Los Angeles, what's on your mind?
So I am living down here. I am a privileged kid, so I'm actually in LA partly because housing is cheaper here than where I was born. But I wanted to mention it. It's really paralleled with what you guys are dealing with, the Jamal Bowman situation, is that I live in the northeast side of Los Angeles near Dodger Stadium, and we have a city council rep who, I don't know why I'm nervous. I used to do radio shows, but I failed. I'm glad you guys are continuing to do it. We can't all do shows. I'd rather pay you guys $10 a month. Anyways, we have a city council rep who's the last one who was on the recording. His name's Kevin De Leon. He's the last one that was on the recording.
Right.
Calling black people monkeys in Spanish and saying we want to make the districts so that they can't vote. And I live in a neighborhood that's very supportive of him. And they're very racist towards black people in my neighborhood. But it's about 5 or 6 neighborhoods, distinct neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And it'd be great if you guys had, like, his name from the American Prospect. Maybe he knows about it.
Dan?
Maybe you could chat with, maybe you guys could chat with him about it or give a little coverage, because you're looking at New York City and Los Angeles, the 2 biggest cities in the country that are supposed to be some of the, like, so-called safer places for people of diverse backgrounds to live. And this stuff's going on in both places.
Yeah, massively cut machines.
Absolutely, and we have the skyscraper that didn't get built that the city can't seize, and the developers want to sue the city for not protecting their investment. And I don't know about you guys, but if you're renting a room and you leave without paying rent, you don't get to sue your housemates for not protecting your stuff you left in the living room. I say the city seizes that building, sells the graffitied windows at an auction, and uses the money to finish developing the building.
Oh, yeah.
But, stuff like that just goes through my head. I'm glad you guys do this show because, like, I never got a big audience and I didn't work hard enough at it and I had other jobs. But we can't all have podcasts. It's better if you guys have successful ones that then get all this stuff out there. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, we'll be looking into that. Thanks so much for the call.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Let's cover this Sinclair thing, I think. So the Wall Street Journal had an opinion, or not an opinion piece, actually. It was reporting on Biden's mental acuity that has come under fire. I mean, let's be clear. Rupert Murdoch owns the Wall Street Journal, also owns Fox News. It's a right-wing paper. And there were suspicions about why this article was written, how relevant it is. We all know he's an older man that's he is deteriorating, but as we always say, I'd rather have an inanimate object in office, but with Democrats as a part of the administrative state and the executive branch, than a Republican. It doesn't really matter to me. It's more just about the thousands of other people that come with who you elect as president.
But most people are looking for a romantic hero when they choose a president. So
this is the effort to exploit that here. Yeah. And so the Wall Street Journal had that piece. It was also then reported that advertisements for the Wall Street Journal on the internet were featuring this piece about Biden's alleged mental decline, all over their ads. And then this comes out here. Sinclair Broadcasting, which is a group that owns around 185 TV stations around the country and has been criticized for being monopolistic, buying up all these local TV stations and pushing a right-wing agenda. The owner of Sinclair is David D. Smith, who is a longtime Republican donor and has donated to things like Turning Points USA and Project Veritas, so he's really drunk the Kool-Aid. He and Sinclair Broadcast Group on their nearly 200 channels played this basically exact same word for word segment all over the country, and this was it.
The Wall Street
Street Journal calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden. As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, the issue could decide the election.
Wall Street Journal has published a story which calls the mental fitness of President Biden into question. As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
Should he be on that or any ballot? The Wall Street Journal is out with new reporting calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden. As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
As the Wall Street Journal is out with reporting calling into question the mental fitness of President Biden. We want to know,
that's
are
a
you
real
worried
thing
about President Biden's mental fitness? As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
As the Wall Street Journal is out with new reporting calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden.
And as national correspondent Matt Galka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
Lawmakers think this can be an election decider.
The Wall Street Journal is out with reporting calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden. As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
Matt Gelka's
The
in
November
contact with
election just
everybody.
3 months away, and President Joe Biden's mental fitness being questioned once again. According to a Wall Street Journal report, members in both political parties have serious concerns about his cognitive ability. National correspondent Matt Gelka has more on
He's at
those
it
concerns.
again.
The Wall Street Journal is out with reporting
Everywhere.
calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden. As national correspondent Matt Galka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
The
Wall Street Journal is out.
I think we get it. Holy crap, it's 6 minutes long.
Yeah, so just to give credit, where credit is due, Judd Legum on his popular information newsletter, and then in conjunction with Aaron Rupar in his public notice newsletter, they put this together, and it's literally 6 minutes of Sinclair Broadcasting saying the exact same thing about this Wall Street Journal piece. And this is similar to that video from 2019 that I think Deadspin uncovered. I think it was Timothy Burke at Deadspin uncovered that was talking about their like journalistic integrity efforts. And it literally, he like interstitched all of them saying it all at the same time. So this is like a tactic of Sinclair's where they basically just send out a big email blast being like, hey guys, here's the script for today. Let's just do this across all of our local news stations where people are ostensibly getting their, like, you know, what's the weather?
Right.
What's the traffic report like? Biden is senile.
Yeah.
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 Great gig if you can get it. Just read it. I mean, you're literally just performing.
No original reporting. You just have to chill and stay and just read the teleprompter.
And, you know, there used to be like, I forget the writer, amusing ourselves to death. Neil Postman. Talking about TV as just like, it's not good. And there's certain people like my mom thinks like, okay, I'm gonna watch like MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News and get the entire spectrum. It's like, that's all trash.
Yeah.
It's all trash. And local news is even worse, Frank. Well, local news is its own kind of trash because it's basically like, okay, what did the cops tell us that they have? So let's get any press releases from them so we can, you know, make people respect them and feel like they're being protected. And then whatever national bullshit. And then the only actual reporting being done is probably local sports and maybe meteorology.
Right. Or a feel-good story or something like that. Brandon, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say I don't think mental acuity can be the deciding factor in this election. You know, between Trump, Biden, the third most popular candidate has literal brain worms and RFK.
Yes.
I think mental acuity is, you know, low across the board. I think you just notice it less with Trump because he's always been like that. And the Republicans are also tend to just be like that too. And it's just like, so it's like nonagenarians talking to other nonagenarians. But, you know, it's no more noticeable with Biden than it is with any of them.
No, exactly. Wanting mental acuity in the presidential candidate is like looking for houses in Fargo and wanting like an ocean view. It's like,
it's not going to happen there.
And about the WSJ reporting in particular, this was noted on like MSNBC covering it too, but it bears repeating. A lot of the on-the-record quotes are about Kevin McCarthy's like indication of how Biden has been, whereas around the time of the meetings that he's referencing, there were multiple reports across major news outlets, Politico, Reuters, what have you, that in private he would say that Biden was sharper and more on the ball about details than he would say in public. So it's like it seems a little shoddy to only use Kevin McCarthy's on the record comments and then not remark that he in private in a number of different reports said that he was actually sharper than he anticipated.
Well, let's play that Kevin McCarthy thing then. It's a great segue, Bradley, because Kevin McCarthy is irrelevant at this point. He was such a climber within the Republican Party that it actually put some people off. He made a deal with the devil to get into power, to say, hey, you can, at any time there's anything you disagree with, here's a motion to vacate. Any member can bring it to the floor. And those 8 extremists, including Matt Gaetz and Nancy Mace for some reason, and she's dealing with her own ethics probe, but let's put that aside for a second. They decided that we're going to come for Kevin McCarthy, and it ended up working. So he left Congress. He's probably trying to find some lobbying gig. And he went on not Sean Hannity, Jesse Waters' show last night to talk about this report in the Wall Street Journal about Biden's mental acuity, and they're trying to make this a thing. So we played that Sinclair Broadcasting thing over and over. This Wall Street Journal report on Biden's mental acuity is played on hundreds of local channels throughout the country. Kevin McCarthy cited frequently in reporting on this, and these are like this is the substance of what he's talking about how Biden's losing it. McCarthy tells Jesse Waters a bit about this, and just notice how bored Jesse is. He just can't wait for this to be over, and how like threadbare the examples are that McCarthy's using.
Well, what I would do, he'd always go with the cards, right? So what I learned early on, he has to read from them. And once he starts reading, I was interject. And then he didn't know what to do, and he was startled. And then he'd close it and just stop. And then Kamala would have to start talking. So it was a play.
Oh my God.
It was a play I used every time. There was one time we were sitting there, and he's taking us on a tour. Then all of a sudden he goes, "Do you want to go out to the pool?"
What?
Yes. And then Jill's on the other side of the table with me. She goes, "No, they don't want to go out." He goes, "You don't want to go out?" Then he opens the door, and it's wintertime, and he walks us down to the swimming pool into the changing room.
What?
Yes. And then we walk back up, and he's created this little room outside the Oval Office to be a little office for him. Now, President Trump had it as a gift shop.
Right.
But Clinton used it for something else. But,
right.
But he's made it a little office for himself, like 10 feet away from the Oval Office. Why?
Like a little mini office,
yes,
not the grand Oval Office,
no,
like a little cubby hole.
Between you and I.
Right.
And all it does is have a little desk in there. And then it has one of those valets. And when I walked in, it had a blue dress shirt all wrinkled. Look at, when does the president take his shirt off in there?
Taking his shirt off in the Oval?
No, but why didn't they clean it up? I don't know why he's changed it. And then we come walking back in, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, please don't show this to any other world leader.
Oh my God.
I will tell you, Democrats.
Kevin, I can't believe he showed you the pool in the middle of winter, but not just the pool.
No, the dressing room. Yes.
When he got
Whoa.
Wow. So that, I mean, really, he's basically a vegetable at this point. So I just want to.
He's a small office.
I'm going to recap this. Yes. So.
Please do.
So Kevin McCarthy is claiming that his evidence for Biden not being there mentally is that he reads from cards, which this is a version of the teleprompter argument that was used against Obama.
That's literally what presidents do. Like, and
Right.
Reagan, who, I mean, I guess I wouldn't just say as somebody who was all there, but just as an example, I recently heard about where, when you're getting briefed on a subject, they will give you cue cards and things to make sure you mention, because there are greater experts than your one person on certain issues.
That the WNBA players in their press conferences are reading from like best bullet points. Are they all declining mentally?
Soros. Soros is saying
they know that the average Republican. They know the average Republican is intimidated by reading, and so like they always make sure to mention that, like, oh, he can read, so like grab the pitchforks.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So just to recap, though, that was actually the most substantive part of that tale that Biden needs Kamala to step in when he's reading from cue cards. Then Biden's clearly making a joke, saying you want to go for a swim when they're talking about the pool. He's joking. It's in the middle of winter time, and he takes him to his second office in the White House, which is, I guess, in the pool house of the White House. And that is supposed to, and there's a wrinkly blue shirt in there. that's supposed to like create fear in the eyes of the American public that Biden has lost it. If that's all he's got, it makes me feel like Biden is actually better than even maybe I anticipated based on how he speaks sometimes in public.
And also this like what McCarthy is referencing is also like the same kind of tired strategy that I think is one of Trump's biggest weaknesses in his attempts to frame Biden, which failed spectacularly last election season, is that they're going to set up this bar that's on the floor for Biden ahead of the debate saying he literally can't string one sentence together. Okay, what happens when he does string one sentence together? Right. How do we market that afterwards? Because he's going to. Even if he strings one sentence together, then collapses. He has still exceeded the bar that they're setting for this guy. They're making him seem like it's weekend at Bernie's.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves with that one.
but I'm saying
it's pretty bad.
But it would be pretty bad when I'm saying they're literally saying he cannot string a sentence together.
Right.
He will string one. I'll bet every cent I have in my bank account that Biden will string one sentence together at the debate on June 27th.
No, I mean,
you're on. I'm
hyperbolic.
I'll get the Nikki Haley tattoo if Biden doesn't string a sentence together.
But what significance does it have either way? Like, even if he has a poor appearance and looks like an old man, who gives a shit?
Right. It's optical.
Trump looks
it's
insane.
Completely optical.
Trump looks like an old man too, and he's just raving, and people are reminded that, oh wait, he's a convicted felon. Everything is just the value of this upcoming debate is to remind people of what they already know and to put Trump, I think, back in the public consciousness, because I think people did forget. Oh wow, it really was a bit of a difficult time when he was the leader of this country.
Also, I just find it also very funny that like Trump at the Vegas rally, like one of the main takeaways was that the teleprompter was swinging around in the wind and falling over, and Trump was like, the teleprompter's not working. It's a piece of shit. I'm not going to pay these guys.
Right.
But like, obviously, it doesn't really matter. There's always the false equivalence of the two candidates. But like, Trump uses a fucking teleprompter, so like, Biden uses cue cards. So like, it's just this is complete window dressing. Like, it just doesn't matter.
No one makes voting decisions based on this.
They're just setting the narrative ahead of the debate. Because no matter how Biden performs, they're going to say, and he might perform very poorly. I don't think it matters. To be fair, my definition of him performing very poorly at the debate is different from theirs. Mine is that he's going to try to outflank Trump on the right, on his immigration policy, on his love of Israel. And I think, these kinds of conversations between Waters and McCarthy are just meant to avoid having the very real conversations about the fact that Biden is doing a lot of Republican things. And for the left, that's the problem. But for Republicans, they're trying to keep that away from their more impressionable viewers, even though like they could spin it better to be like, well, he's not doing enough. He's not doing as hard as Trump would do. They don't want them to expose to those ideas at all, I think. They're just trying to keep the narrative as like, oh, he's a doddering old man, even though Trump obviously is worse in so many other ways, but is also a doddering old man.
Yeah.
Although I will say, just quickly, it's just been there's been a lot of like older politicians having meltdowns in our political system for the past year. I feel like, Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, Trump, like Biden. It doesn't feel like there's ever been a time in American history where there's been as much senility within our like ruling party.
I think quantitatively that's just the case. Like, it's older than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And
gerontocracy is just in full effect right now.
It's also reflective in the way that the Democrats have been unable to meet the moment. They also have a gerontocratic, or however you say it, view of politics.
Yeah, it takes a while to find Hakeem Jeffries to pass the keys to, and people are aging quickly in the search of that.
And Brandon, it's such a good point too, because I feel like also the debate, if I have another prediction that I'll hang my Nikki Haley back tattoo on, is that despite the perception of wanting to make Biden seem like a doddering old man, Biden and Trump are going to argue over who's more pro deporting immigrants,
right?
Who's more strong on the border. Biden and Trump are also going to be like, who's more pro-Israel, who's more stridently pro-Israel, more stridently about eliminating Hamas, so to speak. Like, they're going to have sort of a right-winger off, I think, a little bit, and that's also, as you're saying, Brandon, why they want to sort of shroud that to make Biden seem more of like this, not just a doddering old man, but also like a socialist lunatic.
Yeah,
which he isn't.
He is not. Fact check.
If only.
If only.
I wish.
We mentioned Trump here. This is a funny video to me because I think I need your input, Brandon and Binder. Is this the most you've ever seen Trump emote in any fashion? I don't know if I've actually ever seen him
I know
laugh.
exactly what you're going to pull up.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric and Don Jr. see this video and they're in shambles. I mean, Eric has to go for therapy or go to, well, Eric at least seems a little more stable. Don is back to his Don Jr. is back to his Montana ranch to take some more bars, or that's just a joke. I have no I have no way to verify that. Anyway, so Trump, I guess, did this TikTok here with Logan Paul, and he's going for the WWE crowd, the UFC crowd. Joe Rogan and others keep saying, "Oh, look, everyone's realizing they're coming after him because he got a standing ovation at UFC."
No offense to the UFC folks, but they've done studies on which sports fan bases are the most, say, registered to vote, and it is not the UFC fan base.
I would also imagine that UFC fans lean fairly right. It's like, as I said, I joked about this. It's like saying, "Oh, Kamala Harris got a standing ovation at Hamilton. Looks like they're going to get a 50-state sweep, the Democrats." So, is this the happiest we've ever seen Donald Trump? Open question. Here we go.
I think it is.
And where down we?
I'm scared. The way we don't need to play the music anymore. Just play it again.
Almost a kiss.
It was a little homoerotic, but also, what triggers him to laugh? Is it because Logan starts to laugh here, and then look, he grabs him like that? God,
Trump's the first to crack.
They have the same skin tone. It's just they're both so red and orange.
That's the son that's the son I wish I had. A strong son with a strong chin.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Wait, he said that?
No. That's what's going through his brain.
You can see it in his face. He would love if Eric or Don Jr. were in the WWE. He would love that. He was in the WWE.
Yeah.
He's good on camera. He's good.
He's good. He knows how to do.
People like
I
him.
will say the WWE did pretty much for the entire Trump era, the entire Trump administration. They went out of their way to sort of obscure Vince McMahon's closeness with Trump. They never mentioned him or brought him up on TV, on the show, on any of the events. But then all of a sudden, Vince is gone now, by the way, so they've even less of a reason to hook up with Trump. But they did just merge into a single company with the UFC. And we all know that Trump is a regular at the UFC events, and Dana White, the head of the UFC, is constantly promoting Trump. He speaks at the RNC. So I do wonder if that has something to do with it. Because the WWE went out of their way to, they want to make money.
Right.
Whereas the UFC knows their audience. Pro wrestling audience is a bit more liberal, although they're registered to vote even less than the UFC audience.
I didn't mean to disparage wrestling fans who are, I would say, a little bit more politically diverse than the people that like seeing, bare knuckle fighting at UFC. And you can be, look, I like hockey and I'm a social democrat, lefty person, but and so you can defy stereotypes, but I'm just saying, statistically speaking.
Yeah, Emma, that's the WWE United States champion with the former president.
I'm sorry.
And it sucks because I've said before, Logan Paul might have found his thing. He's actually a pretty good wrestler, naturally.
He really is. It sucks.
And he should have just focused on that and stopped with everything else. But clearly, he's deciding to get involved with Trump. I'm sure it's for, it is for his podcast. And I'm sure he's using it to give himself views. I doubt he even cares politically about anything. He seems like someone who would care nothing less about anyone but himself. But he's also seems like the type of person who's supportive of Trump.
Yeah.
They don't bare knuckle box in UFC.
Oh, sorry, Brandon.
No, just because they don't bare knuckle box at UFC. They wear gloves. They just circle strafe each other for 15 minutes, and then someone shoots for the leg takedown, and they lay on top of each other for the next 15 minutes.
Maybe
it's
that's
very
what
high
Trump
fight
likes
IQ
about
there.
it. He was very excited to grab Logan's bicep there. I don't know.
He clearly cracked because he couldn't stand face to face with this guy in a serious manner. I don't know. Maybe he was smitten by Logan Paul, and he just couldn't keep a straight face.
Logan Paul defeated the very nasty Ricochet.
If he knows Logan Paul does numbers in media, he respects him.
Yes, right. Yeah. That's it. And that's because
He's
Trump's
a tall guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Tall, blonde.
I would be just like you, actually. If I was your age, I would probably be number one. You would be number two, but we'd be right there.
He loves wrestling. I mean, Trump. There are old videos of him with the damn chair.
Oh yeah.
Wrestling is how Trump wants to do politics.
He shaved Vince McMahon's head at the center of his head. Like he's
the theatricality about it, the evil versus the villain nature of it, the performance aspect of it. That's what Donald Trump wants. That's his sweet spot. Logan Paul really is the son Trump never had.
Actually, it was something like 17 years ago. It was 2007. Just this week is the anniversary of the big Vince McMahon exploding limo storyline, where Vince entered a limousine and it exploded. And the story behind that, and Triple H was on Opie and Anthony or something years later or something like that, some radio show, and he was talking about it, and he said that following that storyline, Donald Trump called the WWE to see if Vince was okay and to offer his condolences if anything happened to him, because he thought the storyline was real. He thought Vince's limousine legitimately exploded and his good buddy Vince McMahon had perished in the limo.
He's like, triple. It's terrible what happened to Vince. It's just terrible, Triple.
And to really complicate the whole thing, that whole storyline was scrapped just a week later because Chris Benoit then went ahead and in real life killed his child and wife and then murdered and then committed suicide. Because he had such bad CTE over the years he had a brain of like a 90-something, with dementia. Yeah, so very a lot of weird things connected to the limousine storyline, the exploding limo story.
All right, let's take another call here. Calling from an 813 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 813.
Hi, I think that's me.
That's you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi. My name is Annie Fitzgerald, and I'm calling from Washington State.
Annie from Washington City. What's on your mind?
Well, state. But
state. Sorry.
I'm fine. I'm actually in Marysville, Washington, which is about approximately 40 minutes north of Seattle.
Gotcha.
So I am calling. I actually talked to you guys about a month or so ago. I am running for a state house seat in District 38. And I'm calling because I just wanted to give you guys a quick little update. I am running as a disabled LGBTQ candidate. I am up against a establishment Dem who is supported by Amazon, DoorDash, Washington charter schools, other questionable sources of support. Very much a establishment Dem safe voting record, nothing too extreme, certainly not a leftist. And then my other opponent is says he's a Democrat and a Forward Party member, which I find very interesting. So one of the things that I am working on, I've been a DSA member for 5 years now. And one of the things that we are working on is I just recently signed on to a letter with approximately 7 to 8 other progressive Democrats in Washington State that's in support of Palestine. So we're going to be promoting that soon. We are working to form a coalition of all of the DSA candidates in Washington State so that we can work together and support each other and do press and other events together. As far as I know, there's at least 7 to 8 DSA candidates running for state legislature in Washington State and others running for local offices. And so I'm trying to help get eyeballs on our campaigns. And so yesterday I had an interview with our local newspaper, and I talked about one of the big issues for me is housing. So recently there was a House bill passed in the state legislature called House Bill 1998, and it addresses co-living in Washington State. And it's very interesting because it talks about how they are making co-living possible so that people can rent rooms and, you know, under the Washington state law, instead of just like apartments and houses and things like that. And it doesn't address the underlying problem, because now it will just allow like corporate landlords, which is a big problem in my district. It'll allow corporate landlords to essentially change from renting out apartments and homes to renting out rooms. There's no protection in the bill against that. And rent prices on average in my district, in my area, are $2,000 and up. So,
well,
yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't go far enough, for sure.
For sure. Annie, how can people support you in your run?
So, I have a campaign website called electanniefitzgerald.com, and I also have a Twitter account at Annie FITZ for Annie Fitz Law 38. That's Annie Fitz FITZ WA 38 on Twitter. And then I also have an Act Blue account where you can
that's on your website, donations. Right?
Yes. And I want to say that I'm trying to fundraise right now so that I can get access to voter rolls. Since I can't personally go door knock because I use a wheelchair, I am trying other methods to get the word out about my campaign. And so if people can donate so that I can get access to voter rolls, so that I can make calls and do text banking, as well as make flyers and cover other campaign expenses, that would be super helpful.
Incredible. All right. Well, we will put a link to your website in the description of the show, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Annie.
For taking my call.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Gonna turn on the voicemail. That's our final call of the day. Read some IMs and we'll get out of here. I will not be in tomorrow. I have a wedding that I've got to go to. It's a little far away, so I got to travel tomorrow. Just a heads up for everybody. I'm going to read some IMs, hang up the phone lines, wrap up here. John Brown said, with Juneteenth less than a week away, I thought I'd remind everyone to go get some good food, take time off, have an alibi, get hammers, and in completely unrelated to anything else, find the closest Confederate monument. Have fun. Omega, to correct my fellow wrestling fans, sorry, Binder, y'all know I love y'all, but I have to. It was 2 weeks later that they killed the storyline because of Benoit and Mr. Kennedy were supposed to have been Benoit, been the guy who knows how that would have gone because of all the injuries that kept popping up due to his roid usage in the past. Also, do you think you should have on an Ozempic expert regarding the celebs that use it? Well, that second thought's a little unrelated, but I don't know. I want to wait until I know there's a lot of question marks about Ozempic and what it's causing in terms of people's health issues, but
that's for doctors. It's not really politics. To me, the only real political thing with Ozempic is like what Bernie Sanders is talking about is why are we getting paid more for it than other people? But as far as
like
safety,
the Novo Nordisk, like having them lower the price of it.
like it's not, or is it what it means for society? I just don't think that's politics.
and people who really need it not having access.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, celebrities have been using performance enhancing.
Oh, Brandon, I think we lost.
Uh-oh.
All right, sad. Oh wait, no, he's still there.
You're back now.
Brandon, you were gone for
Oh.
a sec.
Celebrities
Celebrities have been using.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying celebrities have been using performance enhancing drugs for years, for decades, and it's just part of their job. I think the most surprising thing about Ozempic is how openly it has been talked about by people. It seems like it's a much more open secret when, testosterone and other things used to just be like a well-guarded secret.
Well, I mean,
It's a pretty big holy grail for what, like,
for what they need. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if someone told me they had a pill that actually like fixed baldness, like
Yes.
with a significant degree of significance, it would
Without
be
side
crazy. It'd be
effects.
huge.
Or like without you having to take, those, because you have to take the Rogaine stuff for the rest of your life or it doesn't work, right? So, yeah, no, it's a big deal. But to your point, I also would say because women are using it, it's getting more attention in this way that Hugh Jackman can't look the way that he does for Wolverine without some help at his age, and other, Marvel guys. They're all taking a bunch of crap, didn't get the same amount of attention.
I have some bad news for you about like women celebrities and steroid use too, but
Yeah.
it's like there's a lot of that because steroids do other things. People aren't really, performance enhancing drugs broadly do things that people aren't as aware of. So it's easy to see like a big Mr. Olympia guy and go like, oh, like obviously he's like roided out of the of his gills. But then you see somebody who's just really skinny or really toned. You're like, oh, of course, that's just like normal. And it's like, no, a lot of, it's basically just everybody at this point.
Yeah.
And one thing I blanch about that I think Emma can probably attest to, because as Bravo fans, like Andy Cohen, the host of a lot of the reunions and the Bravo executive producer, like he asks a lot of his the people on his shows like what type of work they've gotten done in terms of plastic surgery, which like in a way I kind of find a little inappropriate, just because it's a little invasive. But I guess for the purpose of these reunions with housewives, like I guess I understand it to an extent. But he also now asks like whether people are on Ozempic, and I'm sort of just like, I don't know. It's like I don't know if it's necessarily like his place to be like, how are you skinnier now?
Well, I think that it's a good lesson in that gay men can still perpetuate misogyny.
Right, and I think like, we've discussed that I think on and off air before, but I think it's kind of an example of that too, being like, oh, you're skinny now, you want Ozempic? And it's like, okay, this is on national television. Like
It also feels a lot like the Wellbutrin craze that was very popular like a decade ago. I want to say like when people were like taking Wellbutrin for off prescription usage because it also like suppressed your appetite. So I mean, the misuse of prescription drugs and performance enhancing drugs amongst people who are paid ultimately to look very nice in certain outfits or paid to look very nice on screen is, as much of a secret as you want it to be for yourself.
Exactly. Calvin from Waterford, I think that parts of the First Amendment should not apply to state and federal elected officials, namely the ability to lie in public. You should have to prove what you're saying if you're a public servant.
I mean, within limits, I could see that being abused. But as far as about elections and stuff like that, I do think there is like that should be guarded.
High value male Kowalski. All right, and Majority Report, you're on the clock, and I'm going to be recording all the curse words today. Looks to Matt dramatically because he will definitely be the decisive factor for this. I think, low cursing today. We didn't talk about
you don't
Israel that
respect
much.
the rule of law. You've shat all over it.
Oh, there
That's
we
what
go.
you did. And we know it now.
I've been collecting some soundboard items for when I finally am able to get one. What, it'll be 2 or 3 years at Sam's Space, right? Whoopsie. Dave from Talon. Damn, Matthew Miller came so close to saying the conflict didn't begin on October 7th. Instead, paused and said yesterday. Oh, I gotta look that up. That guy's freaking. He looks like a vampire, and he is one. Train Boy says not needing a car is probably the best thing about living in New York City. I agree.
That's why I got accepted to Pepperdine University in Malibu and New York University, and I chose New York explicitly for the public transportation.
All right, 3 more. Luke from New Mexico. New Mexico is probably among the worst for public transit, I can imagine. I've been to Phoenix, Arizona, which might be up there too.
Do they have it? Like
I don't
maybe have a
even
bus
know.
system?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen this. That's a. It's
Phoenix
a lot
is
of
scary. I have friends who lived in Phoenix, and when it's been raining, it's beautiful. Like it looks green, it's amazing. But when you are there and it's bone dry, folks, you need to prepare for getting out of the desert.
Yep.
Like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Northwest Car Hater says moved out of New York City in 2016, and I honestly kind of miss being at the epicenter of some of the dumbest democratic politics in the country. 7 train solidarity, Binder. Yes.
7 train's a good. I mean, it's a good line, but the service isn't great.
No.
And the final IM of the day. I'll read this longer one here. Edging Comedian says, happy a majority report one and all. The Netherlands' descent into far-right insanity unfortunately continues. By now, we all know of the ministers from the far-right cabinet soon to be inaugurated. The Minister of Migration and Vice Prime Minister will be a guy who has accused asylum seekers of, quote, huge crimes against the Dutch people, who described immigration as, quote, the jungle of Africa coming here, and who described a black suspect of rape as a, quote, African animal. The soon-to-be Minister for Foreign Trade was previously a director at the far-right public broadcaster famous for spreading COVID conspiracies, racism, homophobia, and transphobia, and she once facilitated an interview of far-right leader Geert Wilders by racist caricature Black Pete. Edit, I sent this earlier in the episode, but the first guy who was supposed to become Vice Prime Minister, Wilders, has decided to withdraw his nomination within a day due to him not passing a national security screening, LOL. Yeah, the rise of the far right now in Europe is something to be extremely concerned about. We touched on this as it relates to the elections that happened and what caused Macron to call for elections in France. But what it portends for the future is concerning. I'm sure we'll have a guest on that.
How many European countries are like trying to get like white people to immigrate to replace like a falling birth rate, and also vehemently against any sort of migration from, say, Central Asia or Africa? It's sick and embarrassing.
Yep.
And the
How
same
many
thing
European
with like
countries are they?
That's true. I mean, the same thing with what's going on in America. Like you see, like I see towns in North Dakota just dying and falling apart, and it's like, the problem is too many people are coming to this country. Are you stupid?
Yeah. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Thanks, Binder. Thanks, Brandon, Matt, and Bradley. Check out Scam Economy, Doom, The Discourse, Left Reckoning.
Name them all.
ESPN, Leftist Mafia. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Well, actually, I won't. So Sam will see you tomorrow, and Matt and Bradley. Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101